I would like to introduce myself, Jillian Wolf, and I am with AmeriCorps Project Conserve, and my conservation work is in service to Organic Grower School. And Sara DeFosset is with the Hemlock Restoration Initiative, also an AmeriCorps Project Conserve service position. So Sara's going to introduce our program. Our presenters will talk for 10, 12, 15 minutes apiece, and then we will have a Q&A, and that takes us about an hour, hour and a half into the program, and then we've got an hour-long presentation on what we as citizens and residents can do for ourselves at home. So welcome.
Thank you guys all for coming out, presenters and our guests. I hope that this is an interesting talk for you. So I'm just going to tell you guys just a little bit of background about what we're doing here. As my colleague Jillian mentioned, my name is Sara. I'm working with the Hemlock Restoration Initiative, also as a member of AmeriCorps Project Conserve. As part of our service, we are charged with doing some disaster preparedness training. And so we felt not particularly inspired by office preparedness for ice storms or any of the other sort of obvious topics around disaster preparedness. So we decided to rename this program Disaster Resilience because we wanted to get at maybe a larger, more universal discussion, and we decided to focus on food because it's something that, again, is universal to all of us and particularly interesting to both of us. And so in going down this road, we realized that there are a number of gaps in this discussion in our area in disaster preparedness and food systems. And so we wanted to just begin a conversation with some movers and shakers here in the local food community to talk about how we can be more resilient in the face of disasters. We're living in a pretty uncertain world. It seems to be more and more uncertain all the time. Our food systems are subject to a number of different types of shocks. So we wanted to just sort of talk about how we might, as a community, as a region, be more prepared for these types of shocks, be it weather-related, be it economic-related, what have you. And so our hope today is just to start this discussion to kind of identify what are some main focus areas, and then to hopefully move this discussion forward. Maybe we can come up with some action points, or maybe we can all leave just having a better idea of where we're at as a community and how we can move forward on this topic. And so I'm not going to try to introduce each of you because I don't want to do violence to your job titles or your names. And so I'll let our presenters go ahead and introduce themselves. But thanks again, you guys, for coming. Really appreciate it. And I'm excited to hear how this discussion evolves.
If Amy wants to start on this.
Oh, sure. Okay, so my name's Amy Meier. I work for MANNA Foodbank, and my position is the Buncombe County Outreach Coordinator. So what I do is I'm the liaison between the pantries, produce markets, and soup kitchens in Buncombe County. I also do outreach on an individual level through the food stamp program and educating people about the pantries that MANNA has, the resources available, as well as some education like this morning or on public policy is another one of my areas that I focus on.
Hello, good morning. My name is Amber Weaver, and I'm with the Office of Sustainability for the City of Asheville. Our office oversees several different policies. One of them is our 80% carbon reduction goal, which all of our other policies feed into. So we have an 80% carbon reduction goal by 2050. And we also have a food policy action plan. So I'll speak a little bit about that today. In addition to that, we oversee a community clean energy policy framework, which is taking an external look and working with our external customers on the importance of reducing carbon. In addition to that, we've started to dip our toes into the climate discussion. So we've worked with NEMEC here in town to begin a climate resiliency plan. And a lot of there was an opportunity, obviously, to fold in our food policy action plan into our climate resiliency plan. So I'll be able to speak a little further about that today. And I would just end by saying there's lots of other places, and we fit in the nooks and crannies of government and externally with our external partners and the citizens of Asheville. But we're doing a pretty good job here as far as the items that we've begun. And then I would just maybe end with the Energy Innovation Task Force. If you're not familiar with it, it's a Duke County and City partnership addressing Duke's third peaker unit. They're presently not building it, and that's based on this partnership and probably many, many other technical things that I don't have a great grasp on. But they're, as you all probably know, they're converting the coal plant to a natural gas plant. And there's an opportunity to make it smaller and prevent the third peaker unit from coming online. I mention this because all of this is really important and feeds into our climate, and then heads back to our topic today.
You must be Patrick.
I'm Patrick Battle. I'm a longtime activist, producer, cook, processor. I've done it all, chicken slaughterhouse, cook on oil rigs, all that kind of stuff. Always been an activist. Food is, I realize, a critical fulcrum for creating a better world. And I'm fortunate enough now to be the director of Living Web Farms, which is a nonprofit that's mission is not to convince people that they thoroughly believe that it's true that we are making some bad choices, which could lead to some bumps in the road, possibly even a wall or a cliff that we go over, but rather to give people pathways around such disruptions so that we're able to take care of ourselves should those disruptions occur. I fervently hope that by giving people these skills, we avoid the worst of those disruptions.
Well, and I believe Jillian actually has a list of questions that she wanted to start out with, so I'll wait for her a bit. But maybe a good way to begin with the top of the list would be, what does disaster resilience mean in terms of food and in our area for each of y'all? So I would be interested to hear you guys just speak a little bit to what you think that means, or what are maybe the related issues around disaster resilience and food here in Western North Carolina.
I can start this one, I guess. So I would say I'm probably newer to the scene when we're discussing disaster resilience, and I'm just beginning to learn a lot of strategies and options that we're trying to build out in order to address those. I think here a lot of it needs to probably begin with education, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to do that with our climate resiliency plan. We've been able to identify strategies and options for the public to address. And again, I think that begins with education and then preparing ourselves and preparing our homes to be able to address those type of climate disasters when they occur. And then in the background, obviously, trying to make really important carbon changes to our lives to try to prevent those from happening. But I think one of the reasons why we choose the resiliency term is because it's happening already. So how can you as individuals and all of us collectively better prepare for those disasters?
Well, so MANNA's perspective is that we, literally live in the hand-to-mouth world of folks that aren't quite getting their hand to their mouth. We always have a little bit of tension at MANNA. Are we just feeding people day to day, or are we trying to solve hunger, That's pretty ambitious. So we're always sort of thinking, why are people hungry? Why are people coming to get our services? And the truth is, a disaster can be on a personal level, it can be in a family level, it can be in a neighborhood level, it can be city, region, our nation. And so, it could be something that's weather related. It could be something that you're all suffering, like a flood or a tornado or something like that. But it also could be that your plant shut down. And that's the sort of thing that MANNA pays attention to as well. So, like in Graham County, there was a manufacturer closed, and they knew that hundreds of people would be out of work. That was going to be a huge spike in need in that area. And so we assess those type of disasters as well. And so I would say that keeps us really busy. the immediate need of today keeps us really busy. And so it is hard for MANNA to have a really long-term approach because we have constant crisis happening for somebody in the 16 county service area that we serve. So we just recognize that disaster, when you're hungry, it's a disaster, no matter what the reason why. So we want to be respectful of that and not say, oh, your disaster isn't important because you're not thinking in a more sophisticated way. No, it's important because it's happening to them that day and that time. So we do also, have a helpline with an 800 number. We also, just yesterday I got a call, somebody's like, I really need it right now. Thanks for telling me information about signing up for food stamps. Thanks for telling me information about where I can go next week, but really, I'm hungry today. And so that's pretty much a crisis. I don't know if you all have ever walked around with true hunger. I haven't. I've very, very rarely, but it feels like a crisis. So it's a tough balance for a big organization across 16 counties for us to be in every perspective all the time, but we do try to do that. We do try to look at all the people, all the stakeholders, all the people with interest, and even the food systems and do the best we can with it. And we do have longer term disaster plans in place. So things like weather crises, what if something happened to our warehouse? What if we had a region that had a huge crisis? We do have plans in place to get trucks to that area, formulate a plan on the fly, and some protocols in place for how we process that information and the speed and the actions we decide to take. So it's like that elephant where the blind men are all feeling a different part of the elephant, and one's like, oh, the ear looks like it must be a boat because here's a sail, and then one feels the tail and says, oh, it must be a bunch of rope because here's a tail. This is what disaster and food and these food systems all look a little bit different to everyone from different perspectives.
Amy, can you talk a little bit about the network, the partnership network that
Sure.
you have in terms of food response? It's
Sure, absolutely. So the most immediate one under MANNA's purvey. So we have a warehouse out on Swannanoa River Road in Asheville, and it's a pretty big warehouse. But we really are not set up for direct service at all. If someone comes to us and is hungry, we will give them a box of food, but we also will give them information on how to find food in their neighborhood because we're not set up for direct service. So we use our partners. We have over 220 partners in 16 counties. So we are we like to say the hunter-gatherers. We collect food, we collect funds, we sort of warehouse them, store them, and then have a trucking system that gets them out to the 16 counties and all the hollers and nooks and crannies of Western North Carolina. And then it's almost like a independently owned franchise. So those partners might be a community center, it might be a church, it might be other organizations that are into community service, but they sort of formulate themselves and then come to us and say, hey, we want to do this service, and we vet them. They have to go through some processes for food safety and for knowing that they can do things in a safe and accountable way. And then it's up to them to distribute that food. Mm-hmm. So they have to follow some rules, but pretty much it's their style, their choice, their volunteers, their money, their trucks. They have to put a whole lot of effort into it, and it's mostly all volunteer run and volunteer or donation funded. So it's pretty amazing, frankly, to have that many people involved.
Right.
It's probably thousands of people.
Yeah. And so your efforts cover not only Buncombe County, but Western North Carolina. And do you work with county officials at all?
We do work with county officials. In fact, we're doing some appeals in the near future around some issues with the Community Service Navigator program. We want to be sure that the county commissioners know how important we think that program is. It's pop-up markets in a lot of Asheville's housing communities it's like a free farmers market. And so we want to really stand strong for them and say we hope you'll keep them funded, and we think it's a great asset to the community and maybe preventing some other health disasters down the road. And so we do work with local officials. We work with anyone, really, like any partners. We've partnered with Mission, we've partnered with the city, we partnered with county, we partner with the state. We have contracts through our FNS program and our outreach program that where the state knows that we're helping with outreach and the county is accepting of this because they have a big workload. So, did I get to your question? I'm sort of getting off on a tangent. We have a lot of partners and a lot of collaboration, so we dip our toe in a lot of things, but we also can't do it all. And we only have 50 employees and we put out over 16 million pounds last year. So it's a big operation, and there's a lot of just communities doing it the way that they see fit with the food that we give them.
Hi, my name is Carolina. I work with the Community Garden Network here in Asheville, and it's actually Buncombe County. And I work under Bountiful Cities. That's the nonprofit that kind of houses that project. And this network is composed of over 30 gardens, community gardens here in the area. And we're basically trying to figure out ways to address the common challenges that community gardens are facing, how to support each other with resource sharing, how to build our knowledge base across the city and across the county to have more resilient community gardens. So I think that the way that community gardens play into this idea of disaster resilience and food security is that they are creating small pockets of localized autonomous food production throughout the city, which may seem like pretty of course, that's great, there's food down the street. But I think that the autonomous piece is really, really important because community gardens are creating their own structures of governance, they're creating their own systems of how to bring in supplies and how to distribute supplies. They're choosing what varieties they want to grow. Everything is really, really suited to the needs of the immediate area. And I think a lot of times when you're dealing with big programs, the good things about big programs is that they have a further reach and they have economies of scale and all these different things. But small projects like community gardens allow for people to have some say in the immediate production of food and to say I want this and I know where to get it and I know you because we've been working together. And so in that way, community gardens are really important in resilience. And there's a few different examples that come to mind of how community gardens have very much acted as that food source in times of crisis. I think in this country's history, the first thing that comes to mind is that whole concept of victory gardens during World War II, where I was reading some studies on it yesterday, 20 million people started gardening during that time. Or maybe they were already gardening and we're just doing it in this really intentional way of we have to really build together and grow food right now because we're facing this intense time. Our country's at war. But then in more recent history, Venezuela right now is facing some pretty serious food shortages, and there is tons of food scarcity. The government is has programs where people have assigned a number, and you have to wait till it's your day for your number to be able to go get some food, some basic things. And so there's been a lot of stories coming up about how people in Caracas and different Venezuelan cities are starting to do urban community gardening as a way of being we need to be able to control when we have access to food, not just wait for the random number to roll around for us to be able to go get some stuff. And that also happened in Spain. I mean, when I was doing research on this, there was so many different examples of people in urban spaces across the world using times of crisis as an opportunity to come together and to try to grow some food together. There's also the really big importance of localized food stock, seed stock. So community gardens can be a place where seed production can happen as well. You're not just growing food, but you're also saving seed. And I think that in these moments of climate change, this is extremely important because you can, through seed saving, start creating a localized seed stock. And a seed stock that is kind of adapted to a specific region and a specific climate. and one that is like in the hands of the people who immediately need it. And this is very important. Like, for example, I don't know if y'all have been seeing this article that's been going around that The Guardian put out about that massive seed bank in the Netherlands that is like our global seed supply at this moment. You know, there's like millions of seed varieties locked up in this icebox of sorts in the Netherlands, and it just got flooded this past week because the ice is melting at such a rapid rate that the people who designed the building weren't expecting that. And so it's like, great, we thought we had a backup plan for seeds, and now we're even seeing their own attempts to create resilience in that way aren't enough. And so we need to be able to produce seeds like in our immediate vicinity. We can't be depending on a faraway Netherlands seed bank because you never know. And then there's also the fact that community gardens, like pretty inherent within community garden culture and structure, people tend to try to like really strive for self-sufficiency, so not depending on outside inputs. So most community gardens try to do like rainwater catchment systems, like nutrient cycling, so they're not always depending on outside sources of nutrients, seed saving again. So that's why community gardens offer this really amazing opportunity of people learning how to do things on like a really small scale, but in a way that's really accessible to them. Not always having to depend on like going to, you know, a big box store or shipping stuff in. Then from the social context, community gardens really provide an opportunity of building leadership and social connectivity because these are spaces where people are empowered to like take charge of a project, of a space, they start reaching out, they start meeting their neighbors, they start creating relationships. And in times of crisis, social connectivity is really important. When you're facing a lot, like a jolt in your everyday, and you're facing a scarcity of a resource that you took for granted, there needs to be a foundation where people know each other, they know what resources they have to offer each other, they have some trust built amongst each other so they feel safe reaching out and offering as well. And I feel like I've like seen way too many post-apocalyptic movies where like the response to crisis is that people go into like militia mode and they're like, my stuff, like my things, and that's like not actually sustainable in times of crisis. We need to feel safe, and we need to feel like we know our neighbors and we can trust our neighbors. And also we need to have leaders in our communities. We need to have people who feel confident stepping up and being like, all right, what's the game plan? How are we gonna make this work? So I've personally experienced that in my own like community gardening. I've seen that happen a lot, where people who like just didn't feel comfortable, you know, leading a project are suddenly having those skills and the ability to articulate like never before. So that's really cool about community gardening. So I think that to kind of like piggyback off of that, the really cool thing about the community garden network here in Asheville is that I've been witnessing that happening. We have monthly meetups and people come together and from different community gardens across the city, and people are meeting each other and sharing resources. Like every single week we have people being like, I have a ton of extra plant starts, and then they get dropped off in a specific place and other people can come and pick them up. And there is like a increasing awareness of each other and of like how people can work together and share these skills. So I just wanted to put that plug in there for the community garden network. I also have to touch on a few of the gaps that community gardens face in terms of like being resilient. From a nutritional standpoint, most community gardens are not growing a diverse enough variety of food. Most of them are really like mostly focusing on things like annuals, like tomatoes and squash and peppers, and all of those are amazing things, but there isn't really usually enough protein and grain production in community gardens. So that is definitely one thing to be considered. is that these gardens can offer really amazing, nutritious food, but it might not be like balanced enough to really like just support a neighborhood with just what's coming out of it. I think scale is really important in considering. Like, most gardens are really small, and it is very impressive on like how much food can be produced in one community garden every year. But when we're talking about a city the size of Asheville, like, there's no way the amount of community gardens we have right now could ever even come close to providing the food needs of the city. Just neighborhoods at this point, if that. There's also accessibility factors to be considered. A lot of people don't participate in community gardening because of time constraints, especially when we're considering like working class folks who have families. And then there's also knowledge and education constraints. Like, a lot of people don't feel comfortable gardening because they just literally have no idea. They've never been raised in a context where they were given these skills or taught anything about gardening. And so I feel like when we're talking about resilience, we really have to consider accessibility. Like, we have to think about what is truly encapsulated in that idea of resilience. And like, are we actually resilient if we have a high population of people who don't know how to grow food, period, and don't know like when they're going to find the time to participate in like local community gardening? Yeah, and now also just communication. Like, I was talking about like social connectivity. It's great that we have this network and we're starting to work together and we're starting to get to know each other, but even in a city as small as Asheville, we still are, a lot of people are working in a lot of isolated bubbles, and so we need to increase that kind of connectivity to actually be resilient. And then I just like to address a few different places for future work that could like tangibly happen here in Asheville. One of those is the potential of refrigeration. Right now, most community gardens don't have access to refrigeration, just like maybe like home refrigerators, but that's, if we're really talking about resilience in a time of crisis, we need to have access to large amounts of refrigeration to make sure that we can keep that food, that perishable food, in good condition until it reaches the people that need it. There's also that distribution factor, not only from like a geographic standpoint, like a lot of community gardens are clustered in specific places. Like West Asheville has so many community gardens, but like South Asheville barely has any. So thinking about that, and also thinking about like how do we distribute food from community gardens to other locations. Also extending growing seasons. Most community gardens don't have infrastructure to extend growing seasons, and that would be a really tangible place of increasing the capacity of food production, and that could involve something as simple as like installing hoop houses. It could, even greenhouses, things like that, just so people could start growing food like in February all the way through November, and not be so hindered by the winter season. And then finally, food preservation education. So we have like this amazing, bountiful growing season, and so much is coming out of the garden, and we need people to be able to know how to preserve that food so it can be used during the months where food is least accessible. So that's basically how I view community gardens fitting into a resilient city. And I will lastly add that the really amazing thing about community gardens is that they can weather a lot of like political instability, and because people are having that space where they can control their space, and I feel like in a world where I don't know how y'all feel about this, but I feel like a lot of times I'm just like being jolted all over the place by different agendas, and working in a community garden like offers me a sense of like stability, and that's the emotional mindset that is really important in times of crisis. We need people to feel like they do have a place where they can have a say and where they can kind of like have some roots and not just feel like randomly tossed about. And I feel like that is part of resilience, is like the psychological, spiritual aspect of resilience. And definitely community gardens offer a space for that.
Okay, so and where to begin? So Kiera's not with us today, but I work closely with her on revising our food policy action plan. But what that does, and the goal of the food policy action plan, is to kind of address some of the barriers that Carolina mentioned from the city's perspective. We want to make it as easy as possible for newcomers to come in and begin gardening in spaces that they may not have access to. So Carolina mentioned a lot, and Amy as well, mentioned a lot of our residents that don't have a yard to garden in and need places to garden. And the city is trying to come up with ways to support those efforts. So within our food policy action plan, there are some large-scale growers that we lease property to. So Balsam Gardens is an example. We have 15 acres that we lease to farmers. Sue Neal is also works within the city and has Patchwork Farms. There's not, I mean, he's independent of a lot of the things that we have going on, but there's many times that we can try to help with permitting issues as well. And then finally, there's city property that is not being utilized. And so just this past week, we were able to launch our Asheville Edibles program. And that encompasses three, that's the umbrella term, and it encompasses 3 different programs. One, finding more property that we can lease to local farmers. And we also have an Asheville Edibles Adopt-a-Spot program, and that's through a partnership with Greenworks, where people can adopt a piece of property and plant either edibles or pollinator plants. And then finally, we're launching our community garden program. And that's identifying idle city property that would and could be used for community gardening. And that's been a lot of really exciting to watch. Together we came up with a few different spots just to begin with, but really the ones that have started are those that are already organized and just needed some property. So there's 2 that we've already heard from, and they're not even ones that we identified. So I think that goes back to what you were saying about having ownership and coming together as a group and finding leadership as well. I mean, these leaders, I met with a group yesterday of 30 to 40 people, and I already knew just from the crowd who was going to be my main contact for this community garden. And it wasn't necessarily probably what she might have offered to do, but it was just so apparent. And it just happened. It happened so organically. It was really great. Some of the additional items that are going on when we're talking about our greenway systems, Jillian, is we have the edible mile. And the idea of the edible mile came up through the Asheville Buncombe Food Policy Council, their land cluster group. And that's where the city is in the process of putting in greenways. And so how can we utilize these greenways to have edibles on them? And the construction of the greenways are really not until about 2019. So we're a little bit ahead of the game, which is great because there's a lot of planning, I think, that is going to have to be involved in it. We're presently looking at the French Broad River West side of the greenway. For those of you that might not know where that strip is, the city just opened up the Craven Street side next to the New Belgium Brewery to the West Asheville River Link Bridge. So it'll be the River Link Bridge let's see, I guess that would be, coming back would be east, maybe. I'm not good with that.
South.
South, thank you, north, see, none of us are good at that. To the French Broad River Dog Park. So there's this strip there that we've kind of determined would be a great spot. We've partnered with a couple of locals, thank goodness, and Mark Williams specifically, if you all are familiar with Mark, he's fantastic. He took us out and was identifying plants left and right. It was so fascinating. So we're also talking about utilizing edibles that are already in place and figuring out how we can have the public learn more about them and what's already there. There is potential as well to be planting items. From my personal perspective, and I think from the perspective also that I'm sharing with the city as working in the sustainability offices, I think these are educational opportunities. I agree that if there's really a climate disaster, that's not going to feed everyone by any means. But the goal is to make residents of Asheville and the citizens of Asheville feel comfortable gardening and feel comfortable growing in their own yard as well. So these are examples and opportunities for those who have access to yards and community gardens perhaps, but to have access to them and see what it takes to grow blueberries and then maybe preserve blueberries. And so if something did happen, you have those items immediately in your pantry. I think nutrition-wise, we do need to kind of troubleshoot some of those. Maybe these community gardens at some point in time can have community chicken coops. I don't know. But my job, again, would be to make sure that policies were in place that would allow that to happen, to take down the barriers. And it's very difficult to do that. It's the government. So. but we try our very best. So we do allow, with the food policy action plan that's in place, we do allow hoop houses, and you are able to raise fowl on your property, and you can have garden boxes in your front yard if that's where the sun allows, if that's where you can garden. But as we install these greenways, we're going to be looking for opportunities for the Asheville Edibles program. So where can we put more community gardens? Where can we utilize large strips of property for urban agriculture? Choctaw, if you go down Choctaw, that's an opportunity right there. But obviously, again, very, very, very important, and I feel pretty strongly about this. Sure, the city can say this property is available, but really the need also has to come from the community. It's good that we can offer, but we can't make that happen for people. It's really just providing the opportunity for the community to come in and say, hey, I'd like to take advantage of that property. Or maybe we have somebody that wants to test the waters to see if they could be an urban farmer, and we can provide those opportunities for them.
So what Jillian mentioned about permaculture, there definitely are a lot of gardens who are trying to incorporate permaculture techniques into their gardens, and usually trying to use perennials, plants that don't die every year. Like, for example, when you drive into this parking lot, there's a bunch of surface berries, and I really wasn't aware of the time, so I stopped and picked some. But they were delicious, and it's kind of things like that of having this food source that just is replenishing every single year and requires pretty small amounts of maintenance. So a lot of the gardens do have, berry bushes and some fruit trees, but the thing with that is that it takes a long time to establish. A lot of these plants don't really produce large amounts of food until a few years after you plant them. But I think that that's definitely an opportunity for community gardens to involve less work and also just to have lots of a diverse food source for sure. But unfortunately, that is also that's still something that's very new for a lot of gardens. There's a lot of really amazing permaculture knowledgeable people in this area. But when it comes to wanting to produce food, most people want to grow the stuff that's going to be producing in a few weeks, not a few years. Mm-hmm. But it offers a lot of potential for sure. So that is something that could be considered in the future work is, incorporating a lot more permaculture and perennials into community gardens.
Can I just make a couple comments? Because I totally agree about the connection piece. It's so important. And we have a lot of people interested in food and food systems in this area. And we don't all know about each other. And we don't all know how we can cooperate. It's complicated, right? Yeah. But I do want to say a couple things. I'm sure Patrick has some things to say about this too, because I just learned that you all are into education as well. But part of our food stamp outreach is one of the things we promote is that you can purchase seeds and starts with food stamps.
Cool.
So if you didn't know that, if a retailer accepts UBT, you can purchase foods, starts and seeds, as well as get a free fishing license in Buncombe County.
Really?
So,
that's good to know.
Yeah.
Cool.
So you can go to DSS and get a free fishing license if you are on the food stamp program. So things like that we do. One thing that we struggle with is a lot of the folks that we end up being our end client might become dependent on government, like food stamps or other types of support. And then in order for them to get out of it, there is an actual cliff in their life, of them having supports and then having all their food stamps or all their subsidies or all their whatever taken away. It's hard for them to have a mindset to become sustainable, because that's not how the system's designed. It almost penalizes you for reaching in that way. And so we're always conscious of that, and these types of things where getting people started with gardens, with their food stamps, or getting accustomed to trying to provide some of their own food is something we really encourage. I know a lot of our partners do that. They do what you're doing because MANNA can't. We're not gardeners and we're a food bank. But we love it when our partners are encouraging the canning classes or they're encouraging the gardens or helping them get starts or giving them little educationals, because we want folks, we're not solving hunger. We're not doing it right now. And so we need them to take on some of those pieces themselves. My fantasy for MANNA is that we do something with our tomatoes. Because there's a period at MANNA where we literally could drown in tomatoes if we jumped in, because it's just impossible. It's mountains of tomatoes that we can't possibly get pushed out in time, because we get them on the way out already. And so we end up, shoveling them in dumpsters or they go to hog farms. We try to take care of our waste in a respectful way and in a sustainable way. But again, we're a food bank. That's not our focus. And my fantasy is, tomato processing. Mm-hmm. And we do that a little bit on a small scale. Some of our partners will say oh yeah, we're going to have a class. But, everyone, at least in my world, everyone and every kid loves spaghetti and pizza and ketchup, and it's oh my gosh, we have this mountain of tomatoes and we have something that people love to eat all year round, and
it's easily preserved.
It's easily preserved, but MANNA doesn't really have the capacity to make all that happen. You know what I'm saying? And so bravo to anyone that does it, and we want to, connect you if we can, but we don't always know how to make that miracle happen. And then the one last piece I wanted to say that sort of piggybacked on something both you said is, so people don't know how to garden, or, I've been guilty of 1,000 lettuce seeds in, 2 feet or whatever. Yeah, it's going to be fun in a couple weeks. And then feeling bad that I'm killing all my little babies or whatever. There's that hurdle, but then there's also the hurdle of using that food. So I grew up with my grandparents canning and on a farm, and we butchered and all this stuff. So I get a package of meat, and it doesn't look like it does at, whatever Ingles or the grocer that I've gone to my whole life, and I'm like, ooh, that is funky. I don't know what to do with it, and I don't know, especially if someone didn't label and give me directions. Same with produce, you can tomatoes, they separate, they look weird. And it's no, I don't want to put that in my chili. I'm put it in your chili. It's going to be delicious, I swear. And so this cultural piece that we've lost a generation or two of people being friendly with the food that they can grow and the food that grows in this area, and knowing how to cook it, and that it actually is going to be something they want to put in their mouth and give to their kids and eat on a regular basis, not just to like impress somebody at a cooking demo, but like incorporate into their life. And so we do, we give out recipes. We hand out a whole lot of spaghetti squash and eggplant. So we have to give folks recipes for that stuff, because that's not something that people are like, yay, we do this all the time. And so, you know, there's quite a bit of work to do on that part of it. We do have a registered dietitian. We are doing some nutrition work right now. But, you know, there's a long way to go. Southern cooking, you know how it is and what folks like, and we may or may not. You know, these new varieties that are going to be introduced might not look like that standardized vegetable that we've been accustomed to, you know, picking up a bag of store. So kudos to all you. And I want to say, too, that MANNA is a relatively large partner covering a large area, and we do have to sort of have a more mass mentality. But we so appreciate these nooks and crannies and nuances, and we so have lived it and know it that if you don't have the buy-in on a local level of whatever you're doing, just forget it. As soon as you withdraw, it's done. And so we encourage every neighborhood and every community center or partner of ours to take on the initiative to do some of these sustaining educations, and we appreciate it so much.
So your tomato preservation launched right into my next question or topic, which is community kitchens. And I know that some of the community gardens have outdoor kitchens. I'm thinking of a largely successful model with Green Opportunities, where it's full circle. They're utilizing all of their outputs back in the garden. They've got an educational piece. They you know, in food service work, they've got a kitchen where they do workshops. And I think about all the churches and the community centers and the parks and rec centers and schools and all of those kitchens that sit idle a bit of the time. And I'm wondering if any of you have any thoughts on how to maybe pull all of that together in a single-minded infrastructure, which is teaching people to preserve and doing something with this food that's being tossed.
I wish for a single-minded infrastructure, you know? I mean, my best effort at this stage of the game, I mean, like I said, I think I share that vision and other people do. It's just, there's a lot of other visions that are in the middle, you know, that we're all trying to work on. So I would say the role that I can play, or that MANNA can play, is I can see a need and I can see a resource that I think might be willing to work together. And then I can try and convene that. But I can't do it. I can lead the horse to water, but I can't say, and now you have to play nice and do this. Because it's just a collaborative effort. It's saying, hey, I see you have this kitchen available. I see these folks really need it, you know. Is there any way we could make this happen? Oh, you have legal concerns? I can do a little bit of research on that. Oh, you have food safety concerns, or you don't want them to touch your cabinetry, or whatever it is, you know, and you can say, maybe we can negotiate. I know Feast is a program that is in the middle schools and I guess elementary schools of training kids to cook with fresh produce mostly. It's an awesome program. My kid always wants to sign up for it. They won't let him because he's done it so many times. And it really is a lot of fun. And he brings home lots of foods that I've never tried. And I'm just like bursting with pride that he knows what he's doing. But allowing a bunch of after-school middle schoolers into your kitchen. I mean, really, would you want them in your kitchen? It's just like that home ec teacher is kind of like, I love it, but, you know, I have responsibilities too. I don't want to have to add this whole thing to my day or whatever. You need to have a negotiation, and sometimes that means we don't have access to that kitchen. And that might mean we have to use hot plates in the cafeteria or whatever it is. I mean, you got to work with what you got, right? And so, you know, there's even, like I said, MANNA is doing some nutrition work. We call them nutritional nudges. So we'll do cooking demos at our distribution sometimes with a spaghetti squash or whatever, and say, it's fantastic, try some. And the truth is that we serve homeless people with zero refrigeration, zero cooking ability. all the way up to, you know, organizations that have industrialized level. And so you got to meet all those folks at those needs. But to get back to your original question, if I thought there was an entity that had that resource, and I thought there was an organized effort, like you said, it's so much easier when the folks on the ground have already organized to say we want it. That's a much easier thing to meet in the middle. And I don't know about a comprehensive one, but that's about where we can be right now. And it works sometimes. It works very well sometimes, especially if you all come together, lay it all out, and then they're choosing to work together.
It's easier to connect the dots.
Yes.
One piece at a time.
Unfortunately, it's one piece at a time at this time.
Yes.
And maybe, you know, with funding or some resources hitting certain organizations, you know, I know Extension Service is involved in it, but they're also, everybody's a little bit strapped. And so maybe if we got some injections of resources to some of these places, that would be an initiative that could grow.
Yeah, I do definitely think that like the piece of having food processing right by where the food production is happening is really important, and it is really hard with funding. A few things that I'm thinking about of maybe possibilities that have already been explored or could be explored in the future is really trying to, I'm thinking like in the terms of like future gardens, because there's already a lot of gardens, but in future gardens trying to choose those sites specifically so they're close to places where food could be processed. And I'm thinking like a lot of community centers have kitchens, and so obviously there's to be small scale, but things like that. And also one of the programs that we have as the Community Garden Network is that we have a tool library. And so this tool library rents out just a variety of tools to the community gardens for free. And one of them, a few of the tools that I'm thinking could be used in food processing, could be used really, really small scale, but obviously just like creates the possibility. We have things like portable stoves, and we have things like portable sink tables that connect to garden hoses. And so I definitely don't think that these even remotely come close to the need that there is for food processing. But just think little things like that. Like if more community gardens had access to, you know, portable, small scale food prep and food processing stations that didn't involve huge amounts of funds, maybe that would be like a little drop in the bucket.
Okay, I'm sorry I have to interrupt you because I thought of another thing I forgot to mention. Because you said refrigeration, and it kind of goes with what you're saying. We have a connection to refrigeration.
Cool.
So Thermo Fisher is fantastic. They do industrial. It's like for labs refrigeration. So it'll be like double doors, like $5,000 refrigerators and freezers. And so they tasked us, or asked us, I should say, with helping distribute their seconds, basically. They're brand new, but they're dinged or something, like you would never know that's
right. That's awesome.
It's totally fine. So like that's a resource from MANNA that we have that we're trying to fairly and equitably distribute in the 16 county service area. I will say that we give our partners a priority because if someone has their freezer or fridge go out and they've been storing food, they get automatically bumped. And partners that aren't directly serving food to communities in need get a priority, but we do distribute that, and it's a possibility. I mean, I don't want to say like, here, let me give you a fridge, but there's a connection right there. And what I was going to say about your sink idea is I also have an affinity for natural building, and I was involved with Isaac Dixon's garden, and I'm all touchy-feely that way right down the hill here. But you could make some really simple, like even poured concrete sink basin type things where it doesn't have to be so kind of janky, what you're talking about, like a plastic thing that you're hauling to somewhere and then you don't know if it's going to be stable, or you have like something that's a little more permanently in place that you could utilize with or without additional bells and whistles. Yeah. So I just had to say the refrigeration thing because I forgot about it.
Well, that's a good one. I'm really glad that you said that because that is an important one. And again, it goes back to the connectivity piece of like, we're all doing all this cool work in silos. But from what you were mentioning, Jillian, about Green Opportunities model, I can speak a little bit more on that. And then I'm unfortunately going to have to leave. I apologize for my poor timing. But Green Opportunities right now has a community kitchen, and it is right next to the Southside Community Garden, which is actually the garden that I work at. I'm actually headed there right now to lead a church group that's volunteering out there. But yeah, so the way it works is that we provide almost all of our food goes straight to that kitchen, where they have a culinary program to improve skills, like job skills, for people who face a lot of barriers in the job market. And of course, we, the volunteers, get to take as much food as we want, and we get to give it out to people who come from around the neighborhood, but there's always so much because we're basically a small farm. And so it goes there, and then the kitchen's crew always brings out all of the food scraps and puts them in the compost, and they come out and they pick herbs or they pick things. And I think that that's a really amazing model, and it's really exciting. And I also will say, like, they are heavily dependent on MANNA, you know? So it goes back to the, like, there's this great kind of cycle happening, and it's also, like, definitely not enough. We're not producing enough of a variety of what they need. We're not producing, like, sometimes we're not producing, you know, we're not producing rice, like things like that are such a staple. But I think that, like, models like that are really exciting, and I would love to see that happening more, and I would love to see more community gardens prioritizing food processing as well. But unfortunately, most community gardens are working on a very, very, very small budget, and that makes that hard. So if we could figure out, like, some sort of, refrigeration, but also, like, sinks and food processing stations.
Simple.
Yeah, simple. Like, it can be really, really simple. It really doesn't have to be that much. That would be amazing, for sure.
I would add to that, as we revise our food policy action plan, we are looking at ways to fund kitchens and connect them to the community. So your idea of using the recreation center is fantastic. And we're just at the beginning of stages of that revision, so it's not even adopted as of yet, but we will be looking for opportunities to be able to connect kitchens to people that are in need, or somebody who could do a canning class and come pick up some tomatoes for MANNA, but again, connecting the dots.
I will say, one thing with MANNA is, like, canned goods, we can't distribute anything that's not manufactured canned. Like, we can't distribute home canned goods because we can't guarantee you can't really vet their food safety.
Sure.
And so we have to encourage that instead of do it, you know?
Yeah, that's great though, because it sounds like there's a lot of people within the community that are ready to do that.
Exactly.
Question for Amy. So I volunteer at the Hendersonville Community Co-op.
Thank you.
And at our new building, we planned the building so that we could have a demonstration kitchen to teach people how to prepare, particularly the bulk items that we sell. And one of the criticisms that people have of the co-op is, oh, your organic food, packaged food is so expensive, people can't shop there. When in fact, we do have a wide bulk selection. It's a really healthy bulk selection, but some people do need training and skills in how to prepare that. It's the skills have been lost or they didn't have to begin with. So we're thinking about this kitchen. What is your experience with that kitchen? We have some concerns about maintaining it, regulations regarding it, and just, is it the case you build it and they will come? Are you at MANNA doing the training, or are you inviting third-party groups to come in and use your facility? Anything you want to say about it would be very helpful.
So we do food safety training. We don't do manager level. So manager level food safety training is what you get to run a restaurant, like a manager at a restaurant. I've been through that training, and if you are running a program that is serving food, so let's say you have a soup kitchen or welcome table where you're mass serving food, someone in that kitchen needs to be responsible at a manager level, just like at a restaurant. So, and that's going to cover a lot of the questions you probably have about how do we know how to do this and that, because that person's going to be trained to make that kitchen that way. There's also, pest control is just a real basic thing. Pest control and keeping things clean. the big question I would have is, are you planning on having it be a meal service type thing ever? Or is it strictly a demo kitchen where you're only doing samples and stuff like that? Because for us, there's a distinction. Now, I don't know about your organization as far as, I'm not in Hendersonville, are they a MANNA partner?
I don't think we are.
I don't think you are either. So I don't know what rules you'd have to follow. Like, I guess you just have to follow health department rules and go check with them.
Sure.
Like here's what happens with us. Okay, if you're doing a mass meal, you need to be certified. We're not messing around. You're not going to get people sick, on our watch kind of thing. Like, we want you to be deadly serious about this. If you're a pantry that's trying to get someone to eat spaghetti squash, it's a little bit different because you can have a skillet going, have some sample. Like, you're still doing food, you're serving food to the public. There's still an element of risk, but you don't have to have a manager level because that's expensive. It's more than $100. It's like a 2+ day class. A lot of our volunteer-led and run places, that's beyond their scope. But we still want to pass out the spaghetti squash. You know what I'm saying? So I would say if you're strictly thinking it's demo, it's probably a lower bar than if you were thinking, oh, we're going to serve a lunch once a week or something like that, or a heavier sample. I would check with the health department. I mean, you should check with them anyway. But there's food safety training. That's really my basic answer to your question is, for us, we have partner level that Feeding America, the national organization that we're a part of, developed for food pantries, because it's just there's a lot of pictures, it's just real basic. It's like, here's your temperature, your time temperature control stuff, here's your sanitation stuff, your personal hygiene stuff, your how to look for signs of pests or corrupted food supply, lack of integrity in your food chain. And so that's how you should do that. Someone should do something like that. Unfortunately, I don't know if that intermediate level is available for you like it is for my partners. There is an online Serve Safe, or what are they calling it now? Safe Plates in North Carolina. Look up either Serve Safe or Safe Plates, and you probably can go a little further down that.
You have someone on staff who's leading you teach it?
I teach food safety training for partners. So the way MANNA works is we have 16 counties divided up into 4 zones. My zone is Buncombe County because it's the most populous county. I only have 1 county. We have about 100 partners in just Buncombe County. So the other approximately 122 partners are spread out in the other 15 counties. And each zone coordinator is a teacher of food safety training.
But then the kitchen itself, you have someone on staff that teaches people how to cook?
No, not like full time. We have a registered dietitian who has a helper as well. What they do, honestly, unfortunately, we do have a learning kitchen. It's nice, it's small, but it's like a regular kitchen size, maybe slightly bigger, but barely. And the intention was for that to be a learning kitchen, but what we found is that it's too hard for people to come in there. Like, that's not very practical. What we were having to do is like find people going about their business trying to get their food and saying, come on, we're doing a demo, and that wasn't working, And so what we do now, it's not that we wouldn't have a demo. We do occasionally do things in the kitchen like that for learning purposes, or we do samples on the floor. So we'll say, oh, let's try this cabbage slaw or whatever, or this new recipe that someone wants to try out, and let people, as they're shopping for MANNA food, try a cup of it or something. Or we get a weird, what did we get recently? I'm looking at your coconut thing. We got chocolate coconut water. Okay, it's wonderful apparently. I didn't try it. That's not my thing, but we put samples out and stuff like that. So what we are really doing with our nutritional nudge work and moving product that is hard to move is we have a relatively new program called the MANNA Express, which is basically like our pantries are doing their thing. Maybe they're open on a Sunday or a Thursday or whatever, and they've got their routine. Well, they've got capacity issues, refrigeration, storage, transportation. Well, if they've already got a bunch of people coming to a site to receive food, and we've got extra food, we can't get out the door before it perishes, let's drive it to that site. So we have limited capacity to do that, but we are doing that, and so it'll be just like a whole box truck full of whatever it is, whatever the overrun of the day is. They try to put a variety in there, and then they'll pull up a table, get their little hot plates out, or whatever it is, they'll start doing a demo right there on site. And a lot of times it's in the middle of a parking lot, on the street, in a grassy area, whatever. We work anywhere and everywhere. So, and honestly, that's exciting. That's a draw. And people will try things that they wouldn't try otherwise, and they will pick up food that they otherwise wouldn't pick up. Of course, it's free for them, so it's a little bit different than, having to pay for co-op stuff. But I do know, I'm trying to think of who, was it Steve Liebenhot, or was he the one that had the dream about the co-op advertising, just being like, people, you can get, good prices on these bulk items, basically, of just putting that front and center, or having a sort of standing staple item that you can get for a really fair price at a higher quality grocery store without, that made you feel like you belonged, you had stuff you could cook there, and it wasn't too high for you. Put you in that environment, and then maybe you would grab the kohlrabi, or whatever it is, something else to add on to it. So, did that answer your question?
Yes, that's true.
I wanted to say a couple other things that I'd written down, if that's okay, about, I have an affinity for public policy. So, there's stuff, I don't know if you know, but there's some political activity going on in the country lately. And, on the state, or on the local, state, and federal level, there's always something that, there's always policy that's impacting how people eat, and how frequently they eat and what quality of food they get. So I strongly believe that you do have to be, at the table. You have to be at city council, at county commissioner level, at the state level, at the federal level, paying attention to what's going on with the Farm Bill. It feels pretty far removed, but it could mean lesser food stamps, which means greater pressure to the area to produce, or for my food pantries, or whatever it is. Everything's connected in my world, and so paying attention to those policies and saying something about it. I know I'm probably preaching to the choir in this room, but I think it's important on all those levels. And that, you can never totally prepare for disaster, but you might be able to mitigate some if you see it in the future and you're like, we need to be planning for this better, or allowing folks to do the permitting, things like that, where I've read in other cities where folks have had gardens yanked out of their front yards because it's an eyesore or something, and you're like, this is crazy talk, what's going on? We don't want that to happen here. So policy is always part, to me, of preparedness and resilience.
Does Asheville City have a disaster response action plan, and does that include food in some way for major disasters?
Right, so I think in the very beginning, I kind of mentioned it, but I wasn't able to address it in its entirety. So the city has begun a climate resiliency plan. So we've identified some climate stressors that happen, specifically here in Asheville in the western North Carolinas. And we've identified assets that we want to build out resilience. And because we have a food policy action plan, I felt like there was an opportunity to fold that into the climate plan. So it is in there. However, our next step is to build out options for those. So here you have a climate stressor, you know the assets that you have. So in this particular case, we're looking at food distribution and where that's located within the city and how that web works within our community. And also identifying where food is. And the next step we'll be doing is trying to build out options based on the type of climate stressors that affect food. So in this particular case, it will be drought and flooding. And how can we support and move people through those emergencies? So for example, some options that we'll want to continue to build out, we talked about a little earlier, which is identifying refrigeration and where those opportunities are and how we can take advantage of those during a time of crisis. Another one is transportation. And how do we move people that don't have access to transportation when there is a climate emergency coming? So those that are less mobile have an opportunity to get to MANNA or get to the grocery store or maybe go out to a community garden and prepare or take the fruits down that would otherwise be damaged in a flood or a drought. But we're beginning that process. So certainly there's lots of opportunities to build that out, and we're just beginning that process. We'll also be having public meetings as well. You can probably expect those to happen between fall and winter of 2017, maybe a little of 2018. You always want to think that something's going to happen on time, but it does not.
I'll look for these meetings. Where do we look for them?
Definitely stay connected to the City of Asheville's website, but we'll also be doing press releases, and I suspect that the local papers will pick it up as well. I believe there are 3 public meetings that we'll be having. And that's to bring awareness of the work that's being done. Again, as I was mentioning earlier, the awareness piece is huge. We're doing 2 things really within the climate action plan. Is 1, identifying partners and figuring out, or at least not necessarily figuring out how to begin the discussions of how to be more resilient, but at least, at the very least, identifying the partners and who touches resiliency. And then secondly, again, the education piece is very, very important. So you as a homeowner or a resident of an area will know exactly what climate disasters might affect you. So my hope is to build resiliency for our residents individually and as groups, of course, but in my mind, what we can do immediately are make people aware of the situation so that they can properly prepare. But first, I think, is to be aware of how climate will directly affect you in your home, neighborhood, city, region, etc.
Does that kind of conversation extend to disaster preparedness outside of climate events?
Outside of climate events?
Climate events.
Climate events. It touches on it, but right now the work that's being done is really to focus on climate. And the reason why it touches on items that are outside of climate events is because as we go through the assets that we have here in Asheville, it kind of identifies those types of emergencies that we need to be aware of. So certainly they'll feed into the long-term plan, but really specifically the work is for climate. And that's where we've been focusing mainly our main efforts on.
And that would include floods and fires, or
Floods,
drought fires.
Fires,
Yeah.
drought for here in Asheville. Specifically, and fires are like a secondary. So the first before fires is really drought, and that's the identified climate stressor. So in Asheville again, flooding, drought, and then secondaries are landslides. Landslides are really big here in Western North Carolina, and that prevents access. Prevents access for food, for fuel. So those are pretty important items that we'll want to address. And then also the fires, as you mentioned.
Amber, can you talk to the initiatives of, if any, I know you've been interested in helping homeowners compost and creating a larger composting system perhaps for Asheville, and I would be curious to hear what's up with that recently, and then water, if there's any initiatives for helping folks understand and or some cities help folks purchase. We're not in like California where there's droughts, but any initiatives to educate about home keeping cisterns and how to use them properly. Because we do have a lot of flooding in Asheville due to too much water in our roadways because we have too much pavement.
Sure. So, as earlier when I was discussing all the policies, one of them that I forgot that we oversee, we also have a 50% waste reduction goal that we're trying to achieve. And with most policies, one of the things I like to do is figure out where they live in all of the plans that the city has and other policies that are taking place, so we can kind of help raise those areas of need to address them, hopefully in a quicker fashion. So there's a lot of things going on with compost, and one of the items that we're struggling with is infrastructure. So in order for, one of the goals that the city would like to have is a curbside composting program. But in order to have a curbside composting program, you have to be able to take the compost somewhere. And before the compost goes somewhere, you have to be able to empty the trucks. So let me just use your garbage as an example. You have a garbage truck that comes and picks up at your home, and it does not go directly to the landfill. That truck has to, we have 30,000 residential households that they pick up from, and so those trucks have to go and put the waste somewhere until there's enough of it to fill up a tractor trailer to then take it to the Buncombe County landfill. So in a similar fashion, that's what's needed for compost. We need to be able, and I should pause there and say, if you're a resident of the city, which is whom we work for, our city constituents, that we do not own and operate the landfill. That is Buncombe County's landfill, but we do pick up residential waste. So there's a partnership there that we have to work on and work through and coordinate with. So in the interim, we are trying to figure out how to bring composting to both residents and those, again, who might live in multifamily housing, and how they too can compost. So as of late, we've been partnering with Asheville Greenworks to provide composting workshops to help homeowners and residents figure out and identify what items can be composted, in hopes that, you know, they see the full circle here of composting and gardening at home and reducing waste, building stronger soils for carbon sequestering. So, I mean, it's a big picture here, and we're trying to educate the community on that. So we're also exploring ideas of how to have drop-off locations for compost as well. There's a couple grant opportunities that are out there that Asheville Greenworks has applied for in partnership with Danny's Dumpster, and the city will play a role as well. But again, trying to figure out how we can have community drop-offs. The main hurdle is that if it's big enough, then it has to be permitted, so it has to go through all these state permits. So there's a whole nother layer of bureaucracy that kind of prevents, well, doesn't prevent, but it makes it a little more difficult to address. And then finally, I would say, Gabby, that along the lines of compost, between trying to figure out curbside composting and community composting, we're also looking at an opportunity for having an anaerobic digester at the Buncombe County landfill. There has to be enough feedstock. There has to be enough organics within the area to see if it's worth the investment. And we're also working with Land of Sky. They received some grant funding from the state as well to do a more regional approach. So we can find somebody who might want to invest in having a transfer station for compost. And then we're also, speaking locally to Danny Keaton, who has Danny's Dumpster, and that's actually on a public-private partnership where the city leases 5 acres to his operation. Let's see, I think your second question was around water, and water is a little more difficult because of the Sullivan Act. And there's been 3 iterations of the Sullivan Act, and it's something that I do not focus my time on full time, so I could probably answer small questions about it, but we're just starting to dip our toes and figure out ways to bring access to community gardens, have water be more accessible to them and less costly. In our community garden program that we just started, just to install a water spigot here in Asheville is $4,000. It's appalling, and it's going to be a long, long road to figure out how to do that. And again, that has a lot to do with the Sullivan Act. You've probably read about it in the paper. The city of Asheville just won their water rights to keep our water system. The state was interested in taking it away from the city. So there's a lot of rules around you must charge everyone the same. I've looked at so many opportunities of what I thought were opportunities, and maybe we could lower the rate by utilizing money from the Water Resources Department, and we cannot because of the strict laws around it. However, with that being said, there is an opportunity to utilize rain barrels and cisterns, and we're just kind of exploring how to do that. What I would like to do with one of our community gardens is figure out a way to kind of highlight cisterns and rain barrels, not just for the community gardens, but for all residents. So if they're interested in installing a rain barrel, that they can come to the community garden and kind of see how it was done, hopefully have a price list on what it takes to be able to install one. But we're just beginning those efforts. And then finally I follow up with the Asheville Buncombe Food Policy Council. The Water Cluster Group is working on that as well, and they have an intern that's working this summer to look at figuring out if it's worthwhile for the city to explore having an agriculture water rate.
Cool, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I think we'll go ahead and shift over. I apologize because we could talk about this stuff all day long, and I know I certainly have a number of questions, but so as not to eat up your entire Saturday, we're going to go ahead and turn the discussion over to Patrick, who's going to talk a little bit more about home and community food preservation, as I understand it.
Okay, and I want to thank the speakers that just spoke. Indeed, I could have taken up the whole day responding to things they were saying. I have run composting facilities. I have dealt with the regulators. Do I have things to say about that? I can talk to you about the importance of making sure that people who are encouraged to garden in their compost in their backyards don't think that just piling food up in a corner is a good thing, because what they're doing is propagating rats. And there's just loads of things that could be covered. But instead, I'm going to try and stick to a whole piece that I've written up. With a couple of preambles. One is, I realized as I was driving in, I didn't put anything in here about aquaculture. I don't know much about aquaculture. We're getting ready to get into it, but I don't know much about it. I have a fascination and a complete lack of skill as far as fishing goes, but I think those are also pieces to be looked at. And I also want to put out there some historical context for one piece that I'm going to promote, which I think other people have mentioned, which is critical, which is getting people much more comfortable with accessing the food that is everywhere around us. And I think we're all aware of the Holocaust that happened in Cambodia. I encourage you to get the history of that and learn something about the responsibility the U.S.'s role was in creating the conditions that caused that Holocaust. But essentially, a bunch of, I guess probably the best word now often used is callow, young people who were very ardent and had no practical experience, had gone off to Europe to get educations, came back to their country, and because of a vacuum, took power. And they had some strange ideas based probably originally on good concepts, which was to make their country independent again, and they made everybody go out of the cities and just farm rice. Just farm rice, which is not the smartest concept. And you know what? People did okay. Until they said, you can no longer, in your off time, go out into the wild areas and the edges and forage. And when that happened, the Holocaust happened. People started to starve in massive numbers. Before that, they had the knowledge base there, because this was a very rural country, the knowledge base there to teach even the city people how to find the added nutrition they needed to add to that rice and keep them going. And so that knowledge base, early on I say, and I just want to say now, a key thing is the creation of and the ongoing expansion of a knowledge base, a community-founded knowledge base. Okay? To me, this is really what it's all about, is community. This is ultimately it. I mean, I also have been bothered by, and still watch them all, because I've always been a science fiction fan, or read them, or whatever, when I have time, listen to them, the apocalyptic views of what would happen after whatever disaster. And they're always so, people are not cooperating, people are eating each other, whatever, crazy stuff. Motorcycle gangs, just like it's endless that way. There's plenty of reason to believe that instead what will happen is that people will readjust, come together, pull their resources together and take care of each other, because we're not that stupid. We do kind of understand that without each other in those situations, we're lost. And you have the blackouts and stuff, and there's incidences of looting and rioting, but there's also huge incidences, lots and lots of major cooperation, of people coming together and helping each other. And so I want to play to that. That's our strong suit. And I always believe that's the way to go, is to play to our strong suit. So it is about community. It's about everybody in the community. I've recently, in the last couple of years, come to realize we live in a world where lots of people have been disempowered, alienated, marginalized, and then other people get mad about them having to be supported. And in indigenous communities, this can't happen. People can't support people that can't contribute, and the indigenous communities need everybody to contribute. Anthropologists find the rare occasion of somebody who's so out of whack that they're ostracized. But usually even those people, the so-called schizophrenic or whatever, are found places to fit into. They become shamans or whatever, and everybody plays their role. And we're going to need that. We're going to need all the personalities, all the skill sets, and I always find myself moving right out of the format I put in. The discussion of a minimum, a living wage, this is critical. We now have a division in our community, and it's what they talk about, the anger that we're having in politics and all that, where there's inequities, significant inequities, right, that are based on what skills we value. We get an electromagnetic pulse, and all the computers are dead, and the medium of exchange is no longer money, and people realize they can't eat gold, and all of a sudden a lot of people who right now are angry and not empowered are going to realize they know a whole lot more about how to survive than those bankers and those lawyers. And those doctors that no longer have access to the drugs that they're using, no longer have access to the hospitals, to the hospital equipment they can use. And it's going to need to realign. And I hope that we can do it instead now, that we can all value each other more, understand that there are important skills that come from people who understand how to move resources around like bankers do or whatever, maybe repurpose those skills. Important skills that healers have, but maybe they have to learn how to use herbs and stuff. But also, the ability to work well and quickly with your hands is going to be critical. If we have to count on bankers and doctors and lawyers to grow our food, we're probably not going to eat real well. And right now, people who do that, a lot of our work are underpaid, marginalized, and often demonized. And yet those skill sets are going to be critical, and we're going to need to learn them from them. We don't necessarily have them here. As a farmer, I know that to find young people who have grown up in affluent America that can readily go to work hard and fast on a farm, it doesn't happen. Now there's people inspired that can learn that, but there are other people who have grown up that really have those skills. And so helping to make sure that they feel valued and want to join in and contribute rather than get on that motorcycle and become, the terrifying, road warrior, but rather they see that being part of a better community and a community that can thrive now and maybe even do some things that we might like more could be a better solution. So we're going to need everybody as we move forward. We're going to need investment in infrastructure, neighborhood fertility systems. We're going to need neighborhood recycling. And frankly, all the talk about like trying to get recycling to where we can move all this stuff from the transfer station to the landfill and all that, various scenarios, it's not going to happen. Energy's not going to be available. We're not going to be able to do that. And the solution really is going to be community neighborhood composting. It needs to be done right. We have to understand vectors, and vectors are rats, flies, things like that. How to make sure we compost in ways that we don't get them. How to use all the resources we have. How to use lots of creative ways to process this food waste. There's worm boxes. Soldier flies are huge. We have this kind of dislocation. We could end up with huge numbers of bodies of hopefully animals, floods and stuff or whatever. And we're not going to be able to deal with those in ways that are safe without utilizing what nature's already given us. And that's going to be soldier flies. Soldier flies can totally solve that problem. We can actually repurpose the larva to feed animals and quickly be getting to a place where what was a grisly disaster, of course, it's still going to be painful, but now we're figuring out how to bring a new kind of rationality to it. So we need to develop those skills, and we're doing it. Living Web Farms is really doing a lot of experimentation on that. And by the way, what I failed to mention about Living Web Farms is part of our mission is to make sure every workshop we set up is videoed and available online for free. So if you go to livingwebfarms.org, we have hundreds of hours of videos on all these kinds of subjects, and we're always continuing to change what we're doing. We're now making a dedicated container just for soldier fly rearing so we can get soldier flies to run through the winter. And I'm probably telling some people about soldier flies, you're going, what are soldier flies? It's an insect that's everywhere. It's on every continent except for Antarctica, and its purpose is to take care of the carcasses. But it can take care of any high-calorie food waste. I can see many scenarios. One could be that right now, every restaurant and grocery store has soldier fly systems where the food waste goes in, and they harvest themselves. They harvest themselves into buckets. And they harvest themselves as pupa. These pupa largely pathogen-free. We can do the science to make sure that we take care of any other possible pathogen issues. They're 35% fat, 40% protein. We're in bad enough shape, we'll be eating them.
They taste like almonds when they're toasted.
Yeah.
There's a 7-hour workshop online if you want to learn all about it. It's wonderful, black soldier fly production.
And we are ramping that up. We're taking it to a new level this year. So those kinds of things, we need to be able to develop those kinds of things and make sure that we're open to that kind of creative moving forward. We need every community, I'm thinking all this, by the way, in a community, neighborhood kind of basis. That's the way it's going to work. And we need to get every neighborhood to start thinking about stuff, to look at each other and think, oh, that guy could build greenhouses pretty good. That person's good with dogs. Because the truth is, things go south, yeah, there are going to be chicken yards everywhere. And then there's going to be rats everywhere. They go together. It's just the way it works. And what was the old-timey solution? It was rat terriers. Every neighborhood's going to need a few rat terriers, and they should be community dogs. But there are some people that love dogs more and stuff, and they should be the people with those skills. And sometimes those people don't have very good people skills, And so learning to value those things is how we're going to be stronger and resilient. Getting the fact that our resilience is based in everybody, that everybody has a piece to offer. We're going to want to have people that know how to forage, that either know how to forage or have a passion to learn. And I find that if I get 10 people in the room, I'm going to find at least one that's like excited as all heck about learning what's out there that they can eat right now. And so we're going to want to have those people, bring them in, and get people in the neighborhoods to learn from those people and then continue to learn. Every time I do research for this, I find new things you could eat. I didn't know that you could eat goldenrod. Any shortage of that? The food is out there. We do not have to starve. We do have to understand that we got to do this together. And we have to do it in sustainable ways. You know, if everybody starts to access certain food resources, they're going to get wiped out. You know, so we have to not panic, trust in the fact that we didn't get to this incredible places we did as animals, to where we're at this level of civilization without being creative, resilient, and we did it by working together. It wasn't an individual activity. You know, so that community aspect is going to be critical. One of my favorite examples of community food production was years ago, a partner and I split up a growing operation, and as we were moving resources about, she had used for a pretty extensive and expensive irrigation system. I didn't really need it. I was downsizing. And one of our assets was a badly banged up and twisted greenhouse, which we just hadn't anchored well enough. I was too busy. She had to go away because of an illness of a family member, and it got badly banged up. 4 of my friends joined me. We straightened that greenhouse out using the crotch of a cherry tree, put it back up. I would have never gotten that project done myself. Got that greenhouse in good shape. That greenhouse, with their help and the help of Bob Carnegie, who's recently passed, a brilliant biodynamic grower who's contributed so much to this area, created a food resource for all 4 of those families. And while we were doing it, the significant others of all of the people who were doing it, all 4 of us, were getting complaints from our partners about the time we were spending on it. We then planted this greenhouse to food in September. By the way, we did not need to stop food production in November and started again in February, straight through the winter, no problem at all. And all 3, my partner immediately knew how valuable it was because we were eating out of it all the time. Of those other spouses, as they were loving all the incredible winter greens and other foods that we were getting from that greenhouse, became much more friendly to the project, and I got to experience all of them ending up in that greenhouse with their husbands, giving them a hug and saying what a wonderful thing you've done. Because when you have that winter greenhouse, you not only have food, you have hope for spring. Because the soil, you can smell the soil, the food is alive all the time. It is an incredibly community builder. And the outcome of that was my giving a talk in 1997, which Dr. John Wilson came to, and which now has Diana McCall giving a full-day workshop about winter gardening. And that information just gets passed on through the generations, and we can do that. People can be inspired by projects like that. A greenhouse in every community, several greenhouses in every community, we will be way less panicked if suddenly our food supply drops off. We will know what a huge amount of food can be produced. We'll also know how quickly those builders in the community can put up other greenhouses. You know, we do have to think about strategically storing resources. If our industrial world falls apart suddenly, it wouldn't hurt to have a lot of rolls of plastic on hand, because that will really help us, you know, a lot. We can repurpose glass, but it'll take a lot longer. We have all the other materials to get greenhouses up really quickly. Those kinds of resources and the people with those skills, I mean, that's how that greenhouse came together. I can't build my way out of a paper bag. But I can grow a lot of food, and I can feed my friends, and they believed in me enough to put that greenhouse up. And we grew huge amounts of food. We not only grew enough food to feed ourselves, we sold food from a 15 by 30-foot greenhouse. 4 families ate all the greens, cooking greens, lots of the roots, carrots and turnips and stuff like that, and all the salad greens they could possibly want all winter long. Plus, I was able to sell salad mix at French Broad Food Co-op. And indeed had to scramble to find sources for all the food I was producing. So a lot of food can be produced in small areas with the energy of a lot of people with many skills coming together. Indeed, we're going to want good hunters, people who are good shots. And we want city now to be talking to those people about how they, make sure there's a training course where they learn really how to hunt well. And it's not just to harvest the groundhogs, the deer, the squirrels that are going to be available. They're here in abundance right now, and we're going to need those for protein, right? But also, if we don't harvest them, the depredation that they will foist upon our food resources will be incredibly frustrating. A groundhog not controlled can put any gardener out of business. Talk to Andrew Goodhart Brown about his orchard and squirrels. He had to learn how to use an air gun and harvest a whole bunch of squirrels every year to get his harvest.
So we're going to need the skills of those people. A lot of those people might not feel at the moment like they're part of our community. There's a lot of division in our country, but they are part of our community. They need to be part of our community, and we want their skills. We can value their skills. We don't want their skills so they can shoot the people they think are trying to, take over the country. We want their skills so they can join us to maybe reduce the squirrel population back to a little bit more balance and allow us to get the food. And indeed, we probably will find ourselves reducing the squirrel population a lot, because we're also going to realize that we can eat all those acorns that are falling, and all the food that's naturally occurring. And there'll be a realignment. I think what will also happen is there'll become many more wild places, which is where those animals can thrive more. If we reach that level, which frankly, I always hope we don't. But one thing for all of us to be aware of is that we live in an incredibly digital and electronically dependent world. And in 1859, there was an electromagnetic pulse that at least injured equipment, maybe even people, working telegraph lines. That was the only electric thing going then. If that pulse happened now, civilization as we know it has changed. It's not going to be the same at all. And there is no reason to say that can't happen. Those kind of possibilities can occur, and we will live in a very different world. When we were talking about refrigeration is going to be great, but we're going to need to reach a level of community trust and understanding that we are in this together, and that we can only do it together, whereby people are ready to willingly repurpose the solar panels in each community and the other alternative energy sources to critical energy needs, which are going to be food and medical, probably, maybe communication, and we're going to need the people with those kinds of skills, once again, right, with, engineering skills, electric skills, those kinds of skills. We also teach those kinds of things at Living Web in order to ensure that that energy is not getting wasted on somebody still being able to play their video games, while they're worried about the fact that they don't have enough food. And we're going to need ourselves to come together and solve those problems together, because in certain situations, electromagnetic pulse, for example, the grid's going to be gone. We're not going to have that energy. But there are other solutions. Living Web Farms has put a lot of energy into developing an extensive biochar plant, where we can make a lot of energy that's very cleanly produced from renewable carbon. And then we can take that charcoal that comes from that biochar plant and make it so that it's an incredible soil amendment that becomes dynamically carbon negative. Not just carbon neutral, but dynamically carbon negative. And in 2010, James Lovelock, the author of the Gaia theory, which is a theory that Lynn Margolis, one of our great scientists, endorsed, though a lot of other scientists have looked at it as kind of strange, which is that the planet is actually an organism. The forest is the lungs, the streams are the arteries, and it has to function together. Somebody who deeply understands balance and tipping points and all that. In 2007, first, he was interviewed in Rolling Stone magazine, and he basically looked at the world and said, the color of green is more than corruptions. Billions dead by the end of the century, surviving populations in the polar regions. Because he looked at the tipping points that we keep finding out about, like, there's this and that, oops, methane coming from the Arctic. Things can go way faster when you keep not factoring it in. 2010, he was interviewed, he said, unless farmers everywhere start incorporating biochar all the time, extensively, because of how it can dynamically sequester carbon. Right now, the energy we produce, not valuable. Too much labor. It's cheaper to blow tops off mountains, build nuclear power plants, invade countries, take oil and waste, take energy, fossilized energy that can create lots of concentrated wealth, but is actually wasting resources and impacting the environment. But we can develop those systems, and indeed the crew at that biochar plant, because it's a process that every batch, and they run sometimes up to 3 batches a day, takes 8 hours. That crew, they're tinkerers, and they've come up with small-scale biomass stoves that can make charcoal and can make lots of energy and make it very clean. The whole point of our doing this is that every bit of the emissions that come from that plant are carefully run through a condenser so that we get everything out that can go in the air and become actually a worse greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So we have that ability, and we've done this on a large scale. We need to now get the tinkerers, right? We need those tinkerers to take this down to a small scale. We gave a workshop in biomass stoves in February. They had two. They had this great one called a Tila. I won't go into the details. It is a small char maker that burned incredibly clean. They also had this one that was just like packed sawdust with a column in the middle. It burned for 8 hours, gave off tons of heat, but had 2 hours of being really smoky. I said, couldn't you put the pyrolyzing part of the Tila on top? Pyrolyzing is where you are burning the gases in the near absence of oxygen. And they're not burning actually, but they're igniting and creating energy. And they said, good idea. They put the two together, and all of a sudden we had a small scale, long burning heat source that could use sawdust. It was like, that kind of stuff can happen. That char needs to go in the soil. So we need to make the energy. So I said we need energy for refrigeration. In 1820 or something, the Stirling engine was invented. It can actually just take the difference in temperature from a source of cold water and a hot item like the heat that comes from a biochar plant and make electricity. Utterly uneconomic. We can never make it valuable now. But if the grid goes down, that stuff can be done. So we need those engineers. We need those tinkerers. Not everybody's going to grow the food, but we need to have it that stuff is all connected. So the food's preserved. The byproduct is charcoal. We need to bring those pieces together. You have to excuse me because I can't make my computer not scroll on me here. Okay, so I talked about needing dogs. We also are going to need connections with farm communities, with farmers, so that there are people who we aren't supportive. They are part of our greater community, right? So they're not going to feel like, oh, I can't help these people, but rather they're helping me. I know they're going to keep helping me. They're going to bring me the advantage of urban concentrations of people and resources, and I'm going to share with them my breeding stock. So very rapidly, we have those chickens in every yard. Because how do you get the chickens? It'd be a long wait if we have to count on a city to provide all of the chickens that we're going to want in every backyard really quickly, so that before the food goes to the soldier flies, it goes to the chickens. So that we're producing that food. Maybe it goes to a pig. Maybe there's people who now are selling off, goats that aren't the best milkers and stuff for meat goats and stuff, that instead are providing those. We can continue to breed and improve them, so that right now all kinds of what is yard waste is goat browse. People are bothered right now by bamboo. Bamboo is spectacular forage for goats, for chickens. We need to be looking at our urban environments and realize that not only is there food that we can eat everywhere, but there's food that we can't eat that animals we have can eat. And so this, if this happens, in a solo kind of way, in an erratic kind of way, it'll be productive at times. It'll cause problems at times because people won't understand about rats. We won't have those dogs out there that are part of the community that are doing that work. And it probably won't be too successful. But if we start to look now at the possibilities, and through clubs, one of my favorite examples is the Fruit and Nut Club. It's just people who are passionate about this stuff, who are making sure that fruit trees are going in parks, doing work days, teaching grafting, teaching people how to do this. Those community groups need to be recognized and embraced by the neighborhoods. If we start to look at neighborhood events, if when the city or the power company comes through and has to cut a bunch of trees down, if they look at those limbs and say, oh, those there are all good shiitake logs, or good lion's mane logs, we'll just put those aside, and then sometime when the truck is available with the city, what they do is they just drive them over to a neighborhood that's ready to have an inoculation party. And that inoculation party happens at the community garden, where, by the way, a wood-fired oven was built. So the branches, some of those branches, there's some charcoal runs the wood-fired oven. So the person who just doesn't have a lot of patience for inoculating logs and stuff, but makes great pizza, makes the food that feeds the people who come together and do that very tedious work of inoculating shiitake logs. I've inoculated a max, I think, one day of 12 logs in a day. That is tedious work, But I've also been at events organized by North Carolina A&T where 100 logs got inoculated in a day because a bunch of people came together, and doing it that way, it was fun. It wasn't tedious work. So we need to create those events. We need to create those events with so many things. I mean, right now, there's a possibility for people to look at their yards and say, some of this landscaping doesn't make as much sense as some of the rest of it, And there's a lot of daylilies over in that yard. There's a lot of hostas in this yard. Both of those are edible. There's all kinds of food that come from them. And there could be days where people have swap meets and they come together and they join each other and swap out. Maybe there aren't quite as many daffodils, which are not particularly edible at all, and instead there's more daylilies and daffodils, and hostas and things like that, We need to have those events and those community events where the people who know how to cook that stuff, cook that up and feed each other. So that you're not looking at that like, ooh, I can't eat that, And there's all kinds of things that we don't right now know about that can be incorporated in this. I'm going to be giving a class this summer on summer greens that do well in the heat. Teach people all the things that are growing right around them that are greens they can eat. Like if you grow cover crops, cowpea greens are edible, okra greens are edible, sweet potato greens are edible, squash greens are edible. Some of them are less exciting than others because they're kind of dry. Meanwhile, I've learned about longevity spinach, Okinawa spinach, these fast-growing, heat-loving greens that we will have to have other people maintaining through the winter for us because they don't grow from seed, they're from cuttings. But you can put them out there and they'll quickly grow you large amounts of greens, which are a little strange, actually, I'll tell you the truth. They're a little slightly slimy, faint hint of resinousness to them. But then you mix them with some of these other things like the okra greens or the cowpea greens, or you go to downtown Biltmore and there's basswoods, huge, wonderful basswoods. The leaves are edible. A mulberry tree, not only are the fruit edible, but the leaves are edible. Kind of dry. But if we have these other greens growing in our front yards, they can be mixed in and they can grow in the front yards. They kind of sprawl, but especially the Okinawa spinach, deep purple underside of the leaves. Very ornamental. And no real work to growing it at all. No real heavy insect pressure at the moment. Those kinds of things. People learn to do that. Malabar spinach. Once again, a little slimy, best if mixed with other greens. Rapid grower in the heat of the summer. It could be, people could learn to use that to trellis it up, to give their decks shade. Those kinds of skills. And what we need is people who are excited by these possibilities, Gabby's a great example, and willing to share that information in the communities. So that people come together and learn from each other. We need to make a community value, which we have now in some of our community, that teaching is one of the greatest occupations, avocations. And we need to make that, we want that to be everything. That everybody can be a teacher. We need to share the skills that we may have in teaching and empower everybody to teach each other. We're going to need to have these skills really spread out. Okay, we're also going to need, it was addressed a little bit here, the ability to preserve food. We're going to need people with all kinds of skills. Some of these skills are becoming more popular right now. Fermentation, people are really getting it, and I love it. And fermentation is going to be a great way to preserve food. It's nice to have refrigeration, but you can get that stuff, stop it kind of young, get it down in the basement, and it can last you a long time. It's a way to preserve food without refrigeration. You can also learn to make little refrigerators by digging into the soil, creating an evaporative area above it so that there's water cooling as it evaporates. So that stuff can be preserved with fermentation. But also, there's smoking, there's drying. We need people that have those skills to teach them. If we're thinking about, I said we should make sure that there's a lot of plastic around. That's something that we're not going to be maybe easy to get. Another thing that's going to be critical to have plenty of around, it's caused wars in the past, and it's been a strategic resource in the past, is salt. And it'd be nice to have the right grinds, because it'll take a lot more work to grind it later on. But that's something that, yeah, it's a good idea to stockpile. I know Jillian asked me to talk about what we should stockpile, and I said, no expertise. I tend to live off what I grow and find. But for sure, I always have 15 pounds at least of salt kicking around, and I like to have good salt. I should probably have more. That salt is going to be a huge resource in that. I mean, prior to modern medicine stuff, it was the antibiotic. It is. I worked at a chicken slaughterhouse as a young man, and it was a kosher chicken slaughterhouse. And how did they sterilize the entire chicken house? With salt. Far safer than bleach and far more accessible. And indeed, I don't know how to do it, but we need to regain the skill During the Civil War, no salt was ever thrown away. Once it was used for one thing, they learned how to wash it and reuse it. Salt doesn't have to go away until we ingest it. And then it becomes part of fertility if our waste is handled properly. So we're going to need to have those skills, and we can start having them now. I mean, when I was hearing the thing about tomatoes, we should start working together to figure out how to have community canning events, and to find the places where that can be done. There's lots of kitchens available. We need to create the ethic whereby no kitchen would ever want to see tomatoes wasted because they were worried that things wouldn't be taken care of well enough. We need to trust each other, for them to trust that if somebody makes a mistake there, the community will make it right, and that it's worth taking the chance on each other to get this work done. I just know that there's the energy here in Asheville to can all those tomatoes. I have no doubt about it. If that energy is here, we can do that. And we can also dry tomatoes. I mean, all those kind of things can happen. And indeed, we're going to need to have those biomass stoves so that when we don't have other sources of power, we can can those tomatoes in ways that get it done quickly without filling, our communities with so much smoke that we're all dying of, lung diseases. So we're going to need to develop those skills. And it's always going to count on the ability of people to work together and to help each other. And I talked a little earlier about having the wherewithal to empower everybody and make everybody have a sense of good worth. We're going to need people with these skills to quickly process things like nuts and other, beans, dried beans and stuff like that. We may eventually get the equipment back, but a lot of that's going to be by hand at first. And another solution that's going to happen there is, odds are good we won't have Netflix, binge watching will be a thing of the past, But maybe we'll have binge shelling, People will come together, be telling stories, doing trivia games, whatever, right? It was a tradition in Tampa among cigar rollers that they would pay one employee out of their wages to read books to them. And then they would have discussions. Now those kinds of solutions can take tedious work, right, and turn it into a joy. It's not that hard to shell beans. Cracking nuts would be a little bit noisy, but shelling beans and stuff like that, those kinds of hand things can be done in a community kind of way that can actually be a celebration where people look to it. One of my favorite vignettes from a talk was from a woman whose name I can't remember right now, unfortunately, but she's an associate of Vandana Shiva, and she made a wonderful movie called Ancient Future about India and Tibet. And that's a movie that people should find and watch, because it speaks incredibly to food resilience. I'm not going to go into describing it now, but I saw her speak in place of Vandana Shiva at a conference once, and she spoke to being in Tibet, India and Tibet, right when it was time to harvest the grain, which was all done by hand, right? And these people actually lived very good lives. They grew enough food that they were all healthy. When she first got there, she asked one of them, "Where's a substandard house?" And they looked at her like, "What do you mean?" There were no substandard houses. Every house probably had at least one son at the local temple, Buddhist temple, and every house had a little temple in their house. And they had these celebrations all winter where they drank a little bit of the barley beer that they made. And when they harvested that barley, they did it together. It was the entire community. The oldest people took care of the youngest. They had all these songs that they sang while they did it. And it was a time of great joy. They were bringing in the harvest. They were going to eat again. They'd have enough to trade to get some new thing for their temple. That to them was their expenditure. Their luxury was to make their temple nicer. And they're doing this, and this woman whose name I can't remember, unfortunately, is there, working with them, enjoying it, and along comes some American tourists taking pictures, and they invite them to join them. And the American tourists look at them like, "Oh, you're not going to come listen to that," and walk off. And they turn to this woman and go, "You Americans are always in such a hurry." And those Americans miss the chance to really experience India and Tibet. And we're going to hopefully come to that place, where we handle grains and stuff that way until we recreate the infrastructure that makes it a little easier. But hopefully as we recreate that infrastructure, we won't this time lose the community that allowed this to be sustainable. And as I was sitting here, I realized one of the pieces I have in here, I got to solve that problem, because I'm thinking that one source of available land to grow food is going to be the right-of-ways, the ones that are mowed right now and nice and grassy. We can grow a lot of grain on those right-of-ways. Problem, for economic reasons, I won't say which company, but a certain company in America pushed lead as the engine additive to stop knocking until the mid-70s. Result, all of those edges are poisoned with lead. Solution right now, sorry that our city person is gone, is to start growing bioaccumulator crops right now and spreading those bioaccumulator crops out. I mean, the truth is we could be growing things like squashes and sharing very measured amounts to farmers to feed the animals. And that small amount that they would get of lead wouldn't be noticed by anybody. That's what that has to happen, that lead. It needs to be redistributed. If it's redistributed, it's no longer poison. And the farmers would have free food. And we can begin to remediate those roadsides so that should we need them, they can be used to grow grain. We're going to get there tomorrow? I don't think so. But it's the possibility, thinking that way, of how do we take the world we now have and repurpose it to resilience. And that's going to, more than anything else, take community. That's the number one thing. Community means that we listen to everybody's ideas and we empower everybody to pursue their ideas. And we try to find the worth in all the ideas and help people when their ideas don't make sense to work with people who respect the fact that they have these ideas to make those ideas make sense. And I can't begin to think of the ways that we're going to do that, but we're going to have to do that in order to make it through these times, which may or may not come. Like I said, I hope that instead we all work on this stuff and then those times never happen. I would rather a very gentle transition to a more resilient world than a cataclysm. I think that's going to be pretty painful. But I think we should be ready for both, and hope that by doing the one, we avoid the other. If communities start planning now, we can start to do things like create water catchment. And water catchment, catching water off of roofs and stuff is good, but Living Web Farms just spent a fair amount of money, because we're fortunate to have access to it, to put in a whole series of swales and berms. That means that our one property is going to have access to something like 2.25 million gallons of water a year in an average year. Now in a drought year, we won't have as much, but we'll have a lot of water stored. And before that happens, the water is first going to go into these swales and totally infiltrate really well into the aquifer, and only that which would run off and be stormwater runoff causing pollution and erosion will be what goes into the ponds. And the one pond is at the bottom of the property. There's a windmill that will then pump it to the top of the property so we can use gravity to spread it around. And right now what we're doing is using all the edge we just created with those berms and swales to plant all kinds of tree crops and forage crops and herbs so that we have food and medicine for animals and people and all kinds of pollination space. We're ramping up the production of that land so that we actually get much more from it. And I love that the people I work with get how that could be. I worried that our animal person, Rocco, was going to be protective of his pasture. Because he does protect his grass. He doesn't want grass to be wasted. And he just got it and said, no, Pat, in the end, I'm going to have way more food. The animal's going to be able to eat way more because mulberries are going to grow up and drop. And chickens are going to be able to get those mulberries, which are very seedy. And the chickens can grind up in their gizzards and get the protein from. And the mulberry leaves can be forage. And the alder trees, which actually make more nitrogen in the legumes, we can cut back, feed the greens to the animals. And when we do, the roots are shed and that nitrogen goes to the grass. So by creating this water catchment system, we create deeper food production. We can do that on properties throughout the city too. Not immediately, not quickly, indeed slowly and thoughtfully. People can be inspired to plan this together. And we can make situations that are beautiful. Another part that I have in here is we're going to need to get people to learn that there's a reason to have flowers, thankfully. Flowers and herbs growing everywhere. They're going to feed they're going to provide us with delightful edible flowers to put in our meals, wonderful flowers to put on our tables when maybe the world's a little bleak or otherwise because we don't have all the consumer goods we used to have, right? The ability to take a walk with the people you love in the evening and smell those wonderful scents, watch their various, life transitioning, the day life transitioning to the night life that takes advantage of all these plants. All those things are going to happen. It's also going to be where nectar and pollen feeds the incredible diversity of insects that mean that we don't have to experience the boom, bust crash of trying to control insects with chemicals. They're going to all control themselves by and large with this incredible diversity. And we get the glory of it. And meanwhile, also, of course, that sets up an easy row to hoe for our neighborhood beekeeper. We better have a bunch of them. We're going to want to have beekeepers. Those beekeepers are not only going to be providing honey that can give us a little bit of sweetness that we maybe don't have as much of anymore. The corn syrup is going to be gone. That high fructose corn syrup is not going to be around. So we'll maybe value sweeteners a little more. We'll do better with them maybe. We won't have quite so many problems as we have with using so much of them now. But we're also going to be getting medicine. Honey's an incredible healing agent. Medicine and other culinary values from that honey, from those beehives. Wax, beeswax, all kinds of things will come from that, and that beekeeper will be an important member of every community and teaching people. It will eventually be maybe many more than one beekeeper per neighborhood. We're going to want to have that happening. And meanwhile, the herbs are going to be not only our culinary resource, we're going to be relying a whole lot more on those herbs for our medicine. It's really pretty exciting for me to learn more and more over the years that pharmaceuticals wouldn't exist without all the plants. They learned about all these things from the plants. And right now, I know of way more antivirals that are very effective that are in plants. And I don't know a lot about medicine, maybe, but from what I could tell, the antivirals in medicine often have pretty severe side effects, are very expensive, and we're not going to be able to have. And one scenario, by the way, whereby we could be in this situation is a pandemic flu. There was one in 1918 that killed a huge part of the world population. It attacked the youngest and healthiest people. And, from the research I've done, they probably could have done a better job of controlling it with the right herbs than anything else. And so having those plants and the knowledge of those plants in our neighborhoods is going to give us a resilience that is going to allow us to stay healthy enough to grow our food.
My grandparents are corn farmers.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty typical. Mm-hmm. And it is just Roundup country. I mean, all those towns are just, my brother literally posted a map that shows the saturation levels, and it's totally saturated.
And how are they doing financially?
Actually, they're doing great. I mean, that particular area is already a very economically depressed area, so I don't know how they would be if they were set in another geography, if they would still be doing great. But the culture is very much just, I hate to say factory farm because it doesn't really look like a factory, but it's people farming.
It's industrial farming.
It's industrial farming, right. Absolutely.
It's extractive farming. I mean, most everywhere in the world, except for the Inca Indians, certain parts of northern Europe, and some Japanese farmers, humans have only acted as parasites themselves.
Okay, so yes.
Severely parasitic on the Midwest and dooming our civilization if we don't turn around.
So
absolutely.
When I was born in the 70s, and when I was younger, they had orchard, they had chickens, they had guineas, they had turkeys, they had all this stuff, a variety. Mm-hmm. And as they got older, they dialed back, and they always had a great garden and all this stuff. But the land is definitely usually corn. If it's not corn, it's soybeans. And now I own a piece of it. Mm-hmm. I don't know what to do with it, frankly. I really don't.
I got the vision for you. We're on fire with this vision at Living Lab.
Great. Let's hear it.
We are on fire with this vision. And the first innovation of it happened in Australia, where the land is really fragile, and they already have the severe climate swings, okay? And it is pasture farming, okay? We need the animals back off the feedlots and back out on the land, okay? And it needs to be cost effective. I mean, we're not going to ask Americans. Americans aren't going to readily give up the standard of living in what we have right now. They may have to give it up, and I'm hoping we can be ready for that, okay? And that it can actually be that life is pretty darn good, but they're not going to give it up, right? So we have to show them that we can cost effectively create more quality food, right? Not using those systems. I mean, in the end, Roundup is going to bankrupt them. And it already is. There are all kinds of places. I talked to somebody who lives in the Midwest where corn's just piled up because they can't export it and there just isn't enough market for it. And I talked to a friend who, actually the son of another speaker who was at another event that was in this room, Michael Wells. Scotty Wells is now an extension agent in, I think, Minnesota. And he's talking to a farmer and it's like, so how'd you do this year? Underwater. Were you underwater last year? Yeah. What do you think about this year? Yeah. What are you going to do? Got to keep doing it. I don't know what else to do. You know, and there's somebody who's out in the middle of nowhere. He's not going to go to a farmer's market and get high prices on his things. You know, he doesn't have another option. You know, he is not my enemy. He is my comrade. You know, I want him empowered. And the solution is going to be pastured farming, which is going to be basically you have grassland, right? You use intensive grazing and you do it really hard. You actually hurt that pasture, right? You hurt it enough. You can come through and no-till drill forage crops like corn, right? Soybeans, but also all kinds of other ones, not just those. More diversity by far, right? You no-till drill them in. They have the advantage of all that manure, and this is where food safety has to be challenged. I'm all for food safety, but frankly, the people in charge of it now are clueless. They think food is safe when it is dead or lifeless. And we have to rely on life. That's how we're going to be healthy. We're dead without 3 pounds of microbes per person. We ain't I, we, us, you know. And we have to understand that we work with that rather than be afraid of it. So all those crops will be fertilized by that intensive mob grazing, and those crops are going to jump and be way ahead of the pasture. They're going to do really well because the soil is going to hold way more water, right? And as they mature, the pasture is recovering. So and by the way, I know this is going to be harder to implement. I've yet to do this, but I know it's been done and I know we can figure it out, right? As those crops are harvested, the pasture has come back. So the soil was never tilled. There was no need for Roundup because what was there was part of the system, right? And the animals that grazed on the pasture beforehand and then can move back in and graze on what's left, right? They can certainly graze on the remainder of the corn that's harvested, you know, or maybe only the stubble if it was used for silage. You know, they can graze on what's left of the soybeans. All of that means that those animals are fed really well. The meat that we're getting is way better quality. And you know, people may be aware, I work at a place with a woman who just got in a lot of hot water because she wrote a book about ethical meat and was really challenged by the vegans. And I love vegans. I love their passion for justice for animals. As I mentioned, worked in a slaughterhouse. I didn't eat meat for 15 years. You know, I don't want animals tortured, but I also know that the world works on a system of fertility that includes animals and plants. And that is the natural system. And yes, maybe vegans, we can move away from that, but it's going to be very hard because it's not natural. And what I say to any vegan right now is if you're a vegan and you're not looking about advocating for the rules that allow us to use every bit of human manure, you are clueless. Because the first cliff we're headed for, as I think I already mentioned, is the phosphorus cliff. And we need to have animals helping us to concentrate and get that phosphorus where we need it. So that would be my solution. Is that an immediate solution? Not at all. You know, is that going to be easy to do? No. Could you do it with your land? Yes. You know, could we help you? We would love to. You know.
But then what about all the acres that's wrapped all the way around my little slice of land? Like, that's hurting those animals, right?
Yeah, it would hurt it some, you know, but there are islands. My good friend Kenny Haynes farms organically in the middle of cotton country out in Belvedere, North Carolina. He pulls it off, you know, and he has a slow impact on his neighbors. You know, they see him doing a little better. And so, yeah, I mean, and the truth is they're always pioneers. And, you know, they don't usually have as easy a life as other people. But oftentimes they look back with gratitude at what's happened because of it. You know, and I can frankly say that that's happened with me. You know, now that I see people out there teaching stuff that, you know, I have a harder time making money off of. And it's just like now they have all this knowledge and stuff and they just embrace it. It's like, that was worth it. You know, so I basically think that's, you know, how we have to go with it. But I think it's a great question. And I love addressing it. I mean, if we keep doing what we're doing, we're killing the entire Gulf. And we're bankrupting America because we will wipe out our breadbasket. It is our breadbasket, and that's how civilizations die. There's a whole book about it called Soil and Civilization, written in 1951. It's as germane today. And you would think that some like savvy now, you know, well-educated ecologist wrote it. Highly recommend it. It gives you all the history of that stuff. Okay, let's see here.
And I just want to tell her one thing real quick. We have a video called Regenerative Ranching, and it shows just what Pat's talking about that we've been doing on our ranch that was sprayed with Roundup for 23 years, and we've now regenerated the soil, and there's a little video on that. And then Dave Brown, he's out in North Dakota, surrounded by the same kind of farming stuff, and he's being an example, and he puts a sign out, and he's changing people's hearts too. So just makes it sweet.
And he, by the way, using those systems, took land that could take on a half an inch of rain an hour. Now it could take 8 inches of rain an hour. So using those systems, so it is the future. We frankly, those of us involved with the animals and the vegetable production and food production at Living Web are on fire about it. We know that that's some of the most important work we will do. And it needs to, by the way, include regenerative agriculture, includes permaculture completely. You don't separate these out. You don't just grow annuals here and animals here and permaculture plants there. It has to all be integrated. That's the way it's most dynamic. That's the way it works in the world. And so we have to get back to that. And indeed, all kinds of places that are food insecure right now were not food insecure before they were deprived of the ability to move their animals around and use all the resources the way they totally knew how to. All those people we judge for starving in Africa, we messed up their food systems. Their food systems worked. They weren't stupid. They weren't just like having too many babies and stuff. We didn't allow them to use the very brilliant food systems they developed. And what's exciting is some places in Brazil and in Burkina Faso, is that how you say it?
Burkina Faso.
Yeah, right. Are two examples. They are incorporating these different pieces, right, in ways that are causing incredible regeneration, giving people better lives. In Burkina, is that how you say it? Burkina Faso. Anyways, I'm terrible at pronouncing names. They actually have done this kind of regenerative work to the point where they have increased the water table by, I think it's 3 to 7 meters. I mean, this stuff is all possible. We can do it, and it is being done. We need everybody to know about these ways, take heart, and embrace them. And frankly, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to happen because we have these kinds of meetings. We go out and we work together to make pieces of it work. And no one of us can do them all, And so thankfully that's important because we want that specialization. We want to make sure we incorporate as many people as we can, and we get away from the judgments. And we believe in everybody, And I just love that one of my favorite friends in Yancey County is a primitive Baptist. He runs Troy's Greenhouse, and we are just buddies all the way. And, he's turned me into his organic extension agent. He'll just have people call me up and say, Wade said to tell him about, Tab, you tell him about that green tea. I go, green tea? Now, what is green tea? It's like, oh, and he goes, yeah, you make it with that compost, And I tell him about compost tea, I remember the first time Wade got turned on to Serenade, which is a biological fungicide, and you'd see people walking out of Troy's greenhouse with a bag of Roundup on this shoulder and a bag of Serenade on that shoulder and a cigarette pack rolled up on their sleeve, And it's just like, there was a point where the highest sales of Serenade in the country were at Troy's greenhouse. He convinced them to make a consumer size. Because when he learned about it, he was repackaging it until he got busted, because you can't do that without having a special facility. We are all in this together. And there isn't any reason, no matter what other views we have, we all have to eat, we all want to eat, and we can always work together on that. And what I love is that means that we have to be together. Maybe we can start to figure some of the other stuff out too, which would be really nice. As I said, some of the most important people in our communities are inspired teachers, and we also need to make sure that we help everybody to be teachers. That people who have stuff to teach but don't know how to communicate it, we need to be more patient with them and help them to get comfortable and share their information. Because oftentimes important stuff doesn't get shared because only some people have developed the skills. I've learned, I was born with it. Nobody taught me. I just happened to be able to speak well. Doesn't mean that I know more than other people, but I can string a few words together so people listen to me. But they should be listening to other people that don't string his words together as well, because they may have more important stuff to say. So we want to make sure that we build that up. I know that Carolina taught, is that her name? Carolina spoke to seed banks. We need seed banks, propagation centers, plant material centers, scion wood centers. We need the people that have the passion for that to be valued. And that's really how it's going to really come together, is when we start to value the marginal stuff. Because the marginal stuff is going to become the prime stuff. If right now all of our manufactured food and stuff suddenly stops. So we can start to learn that. I'm just, last night I was dreaming about willow water, for making natural plant, that was what my dream was about. And it's like, because I've been so involved in trying to figure that out right now, figuring out how to root various important trees, and create, like right now, I just learned about it. I'm sure you know about Asheville, the light mulberry. There's a mulberry in West Asheville that drops like all of its fruit in 3 days. That's a huge asset. It's great to have normal mulberries which drop their fruit over weeks and weeks. And that means that the birds are being fed and you can get a certain amount of food every day. That's great, and that's actually more applicable for pastures. But for the ability to make wine, jam, dry mulberries so we can then grind them and get all the value from them, all those things, you're going to want the kind of trees that can drop all of them in a few days. And we're going to want the ability to find the best plants for our environment and reproduce them, because we're not necessarily going to be able to send away in a catalog and get ones that were developed by universities and stuff. That's going to come back to us. And that's powerful. That's important that occurs. At the moment, I was horrified to hear about the loss of that particular seed bank, but our nation is still suffering severely from an increasing lack of diversity in our food supply. And that's incredibly dangerous. We're way more susceptible. There's a few heroes of mine that are working to reverse that. One of my favorites is Frank Morton. He breeds seeds by crossing lots of things together, and then he puts in catalogs things like pink mustard gene pool, wild kale mix, wild chicory mix. And then people find these, they grow them, they see this incredible diversity, they find varieties they like, and they select them back out. Then they enter into the seed world new varieties. And that is exactly what needs to be happening. We need to be getting people inspired to increase our genetic diversity of our food crops rather than continue to decrease it. We're incredibly vulnerable if we continue to do that. There are so many opportunities for us to be using mushrooms. Right now, people go and they buy red dyed wood mulch, or they buy, for businesses and stuff. If you're maintaining a business, you will end up buying, a dye. You go out and respray your mulch so it looks new. Of course, would you want to eat a mushroom that was growing in that mulch? No. If we can create an ethic that says, anytime they're grinding trees up around us, that stuff stays right in our neighborhoods, and everybody spreads it right away on their plantings, and then they know to get, we want to have more small purveyors of mushroom inoculum so that they can just call up their regional purveyor. Right now we have one in our neighborhood. I forget his last name, but his first name is Greg, and he's got Deep Woods. Greg what?
Carter.
Greg Carter, Deep Woods mushrooms. I can just call him up and say, Greg, I need some wine cap stropharia. Go get it. As soon as I have the chips, put it in, and within, oftentimes, that season, I can harvest wine cap stropharia mushrooms. They almost always work on fresh chips. Last year, because of drought, didn't work. But in a normal year around here, you put the wine cap stropharia into your wood chips, and next thing you know, you're harvesting them. By the way, I'll give you a tip. Get them very young. They get big, they get full of worms. So you pick them before they even open. Pick them that way.
First ones yesterday.
Uh-huh.
And I planted them 2 years ago. I spread that 2 years ago and last year, and I thought, I must have done something wrong.
It's a drought, yeah. Yeah, but then they come back this year. And that could be everywhere. There's so many things that right now there's a little bit of food here and there that we could easily just quickly multiply. Or some things like daylilies that there's tons of that people don't know how to eat. Milkweed patches. Milkweed wants to grow everywhere. Let it go, you can't stop it. Maybe the monarch butterflies will survive. Wouldn't that be nice? And we can eat all different kinds of parts of it. It also gets attacked by 2 different kinds of bugs, which are actually just steakhouses for all the beneficial insects. And to me, a source of great entertainment. I just like to go out there and look at all the different predators that are on the milkweed. Those kinds of solutions we can do as a community. And that kind of stuff was pretty easy. I just heard about the monarchs, looked at my holding in silo, and realized that one corner had milkweed that I've been mowing down for years. I just let it come up. I mow around it now. It's getting bigger every year. I have loads. I probably have 400 milkweed plants now. It takes one careful mowing a year to free it so that it dominates, and then it's just there. And should I need to eat it? I can eat the flowers. I can eat all different parts of that. Flower buds, all different parts of that milkweed. And indeed, during World War II, they made life jackets out of the seed fluff. So we could use it for insulation. We have all these resources right here. We just have to make sure they mentioned sarvice berries. They're native. They're everywhere. We have cultivars. We just put 100 cultivars into our berms and swales. They could be growing everywhere and making tons of food. And they're incredibly early fruit, which, by the way, is going to be very useful because right now we're plagued by the product of trade with China by an insect called the spotted-winged Drosophila that's getting in our later soft fruits and rooting it because it has a serrated ovipositor, and so it infects fruit before it's ripe. So fruit that comes in early is going to matter a whole lot. So those are some of the things I really want to encourage people to support. We have a wealth, and not by accident, of organizations that are helping to move this agenda forward in our region. We're incredibly lucky that way. When I get to the list here, and by the way, I know I forgot some, and that's good because you are out there, so whatever organization I don't mention, do me a favor and shout it out to me. But we have the Organic Growers School, does incredible work all the time to get this information out there and empower people. If you haven't been to the Organic Growers School, go to it. You want to feel community? Well, you feel community there, We have Carolina Farm Stewardship, which has been around since the early 80s and has been working to support farmers, sustainable farmers throughout the country, works on legislation, really important organization. Highly recommend working with it. We have, locally we have our ASAP, which works on the marketing end and helps to make sure farmers have their markets, and works with kids to learn how to grow food in schools. We have the Asheville Mushroom Club with Asheville Mushroom Club, which I just mentioned. We have the North Carolina Extension Service, which has gotten better and better for organic growers over the past 30 years. When I first came here, I never found extension agents that were hostile to organic, but I found just a complete lack of knowledge, just nothing they could offer me. And now I find that they have more and more to offer all the time. They see more and more viability to the organic sector of the agricultural community, which, by the way, before the end of World War II, that was the only way we grew food, by and large. And should we get hit by an electromagnetic pulse or whatever other major dislocation, that's going to be the only way we're going to grow food again as soon as we run through all the heavy-duty insecticides and fertilizers that we're using now. So the fact that our extension service is embracing that, all the better. Living Web Farms, of course, is another resource for this. If I've forgotten any organizations, the Fruit and Nut Club, a wonderful online. To me, I mostly just interact with them via online, but they're out there making sure that our edible parks are taken care of, swapping all kinds of plant material, just doing incredible work. And then there's the Nutty Buddy Collective, which is trying to get more nut trees planted, using unused land to get nut trees out there. We really want to look at that. People would be advised to get themselves a good nutcracker. Right now, my partner Diane, who unfortunately couldn't stay because she was worried about the dog getting too hot, she one time for Christmas, because she remembered the tradition as a youngin', borrowed a nutcracker and gave black walnut meats to everybody for Christmas. The amount of time she spent cracking that and the amount of nuts that she gave to each person. But should we no longer have all of our current pastimes and want to have those kinds of nuts, then we'll take the time to do that. It'll be worth cracking those nuts to get that food. And there's so many nuts out there that we could be eating. And speaking of nuts, beech tree leaves are edible. There's so many tree leaves and other plants that are edible. I'm not going to even begin to try and cover them all now, but we should be having more and more workshops, more and more venues for people to learn that. Familiarizing people with that, having events where we serve these foods so people aren't afraid of them. Oh, I know, the last
piece that I want to go to, I kind of touched on it. We just can't keep handling human waste the way we do and be sustainable. And I know it's going to be a slow haul to get to a sustainable way to handle human waste. And it's kind of ironic because the organic industry had to oppose the use of human sludge, right, on organic farms. And that's ridiculous. It should be totally, there's always, every bit of human waste goes back into our farms. The problem is it's all polluted with all of these industrial pollutants and all of these medicines and stuff like that. We have to learn not to destroy this resource. It was never meant to become a toxic mix. It always was supposed to be that we eat food and what we don't eat gets recycled by dung beetles, by all kinds of other life forms, and quickly, very quickly, gets back to producing more food and more life for the world. We have to get back there. It's as simple as that. We can immediately start to do that with urine. Urine is safe to use as a fertilizer, and if you've ever used it, it's incredibly effective. If you're afraid to use it for fertilizer, you can use it to make your compost piles get hot so they quickly degrade that food waste and you're not multiplying rats. You can at least do that. But now, for years had thought that you wanted it to sit for 6 months to be certain it didn't have one of a very few diseases. About the only one that I know of that is likely to occur in human urine in our climate is salmonella. That's a serious disease, though, so you want to make sure that your urine is not going to pass salmonella on. And the way you do that used to be that you let it sit for 6 months. Strong odor if you do that, by the way. But it dissipates incredibly quickly. And you get used to it like any odor if you're getting the fertilizer value. Now they're saying 1 month at 68 degrees, and the pH changes and that urine is safe. Once again, they're already using this in New England for hay fields. And that's just the beginning step, right? It needs to be used everywhere. If not used to grow food, then at least biomass, which then can be used to grow food and create energy. But for home gardeners, it's the go-to. Fish emulsion is not nearly as sustainable. We're fortunate to have a local source of fish emulsion, Brown's, which is made from trout, which is pretty good. We're not taking part of the industrial fishing system, which is going to collapse. Which is where a lot of fish emulsion comes from. So we can get Brown's. That's pretty sustainable. It still has to be hauled by a truck. Your urine, you get it every day. It's incredible fertilizer. It can be used safely. Dilute it 10 to 1. And just use it to feed your plants. You'll be impressed at how they grow. Don't push them into the fall when they're going to frost. They'll be too tender. Right now, I gave my first urine feed to my blueberries. I wanted them to be out of the danger of frost before I pushed that growth so fast. We want to do that. Okay? Fences. You should have grapes and kiwis and things like that growing along all the fences we still want. The fences between the backyards need to come down. Those need to become community growing areas. We need to want our neighbors to see us again. We want to have those community dogs protecting those neighbors. Maybe some of those areas come down and they become grazing areas. We're going to want to have that happen again. But those fences we do want still, they should all be used as trellises to grow food. So definitely, I haven't already gotten across, connect with and support local permaculture groups. Their vision is critical to our future. Finally, support local farmers, Doug. Get your vegetables from CSAs, buy local when you're in like Earth Fair or the French Broad Food Co-op as much as you can. Go to the farmers markets. Farmers markets, one of the most hopeful sites in our country. It's where we can come together. It's where community still happens. And it's where people get the importance of interfacing with their farmers and that knowledge being shared and that us understanding each other. So basically, that's about it. But I'm happy to entertain any questions.
I really enjoyed your remarks, and this maybe isn't so much as a question as a comment. You got pretty close to something that's really important, an issue that's important to me when you talked about highway right-of-ways, which I really support our efforts to increase monarch populations, and those right-of-ways are going to waste because DOTs across the country don't understand it. They let the milkweed grow there. We're not putting pressure on farmers to set aside land for milkweed. And so that's really important, and you need to talk about that. But something that just drives me nuts, we were spending so much money and using up so many acres of land mowing lawn that just serves no purpose. I mean, a lawn that's used as a play area, or in some cases you do have an architectural feature that needs to be set off by lawn. It's, like the frame around a picture is really important. But I think this is so important because the office park where I work, we said there was this area that was being mown. About 2 acres. We saved $250 a month during the growing season by stopping the mowing and improved riparian water quality in a creek at the back of the property. So just a comment. I think that people are overlooking, like people say, I don't have land to grow food. I don't know where I'm going to do this. There's so many acres of lawn that are just serving no purpose other than, it's this area we're supposed to mow it. And it's just accepted. That's the norm. And it drives me batty. So just a comment.
Actually, thank you for saying that because I kind of left out. Of course we need to have gardens where all these lawns are. That's just a given. I don't have to tell people that. You're going to figure that out right away. You don't have food, the lawn's coming up, the garden's going in.
Yeah.
That's just a natural. And indeed, a little bit of lawn, good idea. A little bit of lawn is where we come together, where we have community. And that has those buffers of the beneficial insect flowers and the herbs. More things mixed together, and that lawn should rotate. Sometimes that lawn comes out and goes to something else. And some neighborhoods decide that they're not going to have gardens in their backyards. Fences are going to come up, and the sheep are going through there. But those are the kind of things that we need to have happening. Absolutely. And I think that part will be pretty easy. I don't think that people will waste a lot of time on that one. I mean, maybe they'll get locked up into trying to have their own little patch and protect it and hope nobody steals it. But it's going to be way more effective for the community to be growing the food and everybody to get that they're invested in that community.
Just one comment on that. I see what you're saying and I know this isn't a presentation about lawns, so I'll get off it really quickly. I see what you're saying about homeowners. We'll get that message quickly. But I see these spaces where you've got a management company, like you've got several layers of ownership or management away from the person who's actually interfacing with the lawns, like in an office park, for example. And I'm a big critic of it because they will just mow all these areas. The employees who are working in the offices in that office park, you could have strawberry beds, low maintenance. You could have cherry tomato plants where people on their way to the office can just grab some tomatoes on the way into the building, which is something we're starting to work on where I work. But that's what I'm getting at.
Absolutely. My friend Jackie Greenfield used to be the vice president for procurement at Gaia Herb Farm, and she started a CSA project at Gaia Herb Farm, and the outcome was, of course, improved health, people losing weight, people eating better, more community. Absolutely, we should be turning those big pieces of land into places where people are growing food, and the people working in those places should be involved in growing that food. And will that happen quickly? I don't know, but should we hit a disruption? It'll happen very quickly. That land, as it happens all over the world, when there's empty land and people without land, it gets taken. And it doesn't have to be taken usually it's just taken very passively. I mean, that's the ultimate passive resistance is just to get on that land and start growing food. It's like, try and take me off here. If there's not a lot of food around, but far better that we get there beforehand. As I put out when I first said this, I want to see all these things start happening now so we don't get to that cataclysmic place, So we're not at each other's throats, but rather we're in trust with each other and in community with each other.
Right.
And creating this resilience. And it most definitely should happen that those places, and of course, all those management companies would save money.
Yeah.
They're spending huge amounts of money on that,
Exactly.
I mean, we put a few lawn services out of business, but we could certainly come up with all kinds of important industries that we need that skill set for.
Wouldn't it be great if the lawn service companies train their employees to learn how to take care of native plants and
they'd be much happier employees, I bet you.
Yeah.
They would find their work way more interesting. Absolutely. Yeah. I don't think that's inappropriate at all. That point is very well taken. Yeah.
Patrick, I'm interested. I have a specific question. The larger question is about if the city of Asheville has interfaced with you and asked for information and how so. And I know you're in Mills River, so maybe there's has the county ever approached you?
I just heard from Kiera, is that how you say her name? And we've actually missed each other, but I'm going to pass this document on, which, by the way, I'm going to clean up and have it posted on our website.
Specifically about soldier flies and about the charcoal, the ability for, I know the city isn't the electrical company, but they are these very large entities, patriarchal, that own and move things and have a lot of strict laws around them, so maybe they can talk the same language. But how are we going to interface these things? And you're, of course, are this like private, super colorful, super nutrient dense, rich, purposeful entity, and then we have these business, which are capitalistic, extractive.
Well, and we totally want to work with them, you know. And
So
I utterly believe that one of my favorite bits of knowledge I learned from Elizabeth Henderson, who's this wonderful author of a book called Sharing the Harvest, and I caught up on her because she was into the politics of food, which I care a lot about. And so she came and gave a talk, and she talked about a study by, I think it was Goldsmith, but it might have been somebody else. It's a classic anthropological study, and the study showed that in towns where there was a single industry, when they were compared to towns where there was diversified industry, every index of the quality of life in the diversified towns was better than in the single industry towns. And this is like, anthropology or whatever it is, sociology is not a very good science to reproduce. This study has been studied over and over again and continually shows the same thing. So what I want to see is, rather than like fretting about whether something is capitalist or whether they're government or whatever, is us saying we can do this stuff together. We want to share our technology that we have for the biochar. And indeed, I've already mentioned it to Cecil years ago when he hasn't made the time to come down. But for sure, one of the immediate uses of that biochar technology that can actually be cost effective is heating buildings. So large government buildings, a biochar plant can make a lot of sense. And we would love to share that, and then that char could be available to farmers, And indeed, another dream I have is the creation of Mondragon type. People know about Mondragon? Mondragon is a cooperative collection of industries that has 80,000 employees in Spain. And they're vertically integrated, so they do everything. They have industrial, they have banking, they have schools, they have medical, they have all of it. They have stores. And so we're looking at as a model, because frankly, if we try and create all of this stuff but still don't have economic engines, then it's not going to work. So we also need to have people that are rooted in good jobs and want to stay where they are and make their immediate area work. So one of our visions is to set up a Mondragon type shop that would make small-scale biochar equipment and small-scale no-till farming equipment. It would actually be multifunctional and changed to what was needed at the time. So it might have 6 months of making biochar equipment and then realize, pedal-powered equipment is important, because that's another piece that's going to have to be there. We're going to have a workshop on that this year. So, I'm open to all that stuff. Like I said, I haven't much yet, but Kiera did reach out to me, and I said, boy, have I got a lot to say. We haven't gotten together yet, but I will be talking with her, and we totally want to, and I don't really care about borders at all. I don't care if we're in Harrison County and Buncombe County's here, Frankly, Asheville is my town in lots of ways. This is where I shop. This is where, when I had a bakery where I sold my bread, this is where I came to sell my farmer's market stuff. I pay all kinds of sales taxes here, I don't really think that Asheville, that Buncombe County is not part of my community. It is, and I want to help in our community. Living Web does not want to just be, this wonderful example here. It wants to, cause spin-offs everywhere. It's about sharing and getting these things to happen everywhere. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I want to just voice out loud the larger picture that I'm noticing and identifying, which is that we have different entities, we need integration for these things to happen. Laws are the largest things that prevent solutions from happening at this point, and we're obeying the laws, so they continue to not happen. But just wanted to point out that the structures that exist will keep us from creating and from implementing the solutions and possibly creating them, so you have to test. So just wanted to say out loud and have that on everyone's mind, is that we have to be constantly thinking about how the integration can happen. And when I joined Patchwork Farms, I saw that integration of, okay, there's the city that does want the food policy implemented, but I've tried to do that on city land, and it's been an awful experience. So And we need biochar, and we need the composting, and so I just keep thinking about how do we integrate this, and I guess the solution hopefully can be that private people, private entities, and companies can be created to be the biochar and anything else that's needed, the rainwater harvesting company, and that will be what keeps the water of forward progression, recreation, renewal happening. But we have to keep talking about that and figuring it out so that we don't have to keep stopping. Our creativity and our solutions aren't stopped.
Well, and I think Asheville is a wonderful place for that kind of experimenting to happen. I mean, Asheville didn't happen by accident. People came here with visions and did all kinds of creative things to make Asheville happen. To where now, yeah, I know that you've had frustrating experiences with city things, and I've had incredible frustration with compost regulators and stuff, even though they say they want to support it and stuff, you know. I experience that stuff all the time. But we have our victories, you know. Now I have chickens in Asheville. That didn't used to be something they could do, you know. And they're listening to us, and we have to keep pushing for that, and we need everybody to get behind us. Like I said, people really need to start understanding food safety, really completely understanding what that's all about, and what's wrong-headed about how we're doing it now, you know. Things like composting, the regulations, basically, I know how to make great compost. I can make great compost in neighborhoods. It'd be great if there was an abandoned parking lot, because that helps, you know. But I could do it without that. I can't do it because of regulations anywhere. You know, I owned a compost turner. I sold it because I couldn't afford to get a permit. You know, I mean, guy at Farm spent $30,000. Well, that's not secret information. You gotta get a permit to be able to make compost. I don't have $30,000. You know, it was a huge, you know, all-night grant writing experience and stuff for me, and then lots of hitting all kinds of benchmarks to get my compost turner, which I had to sell. So I couldn't legally use it once I no longer had my temporary permit. And yet, I know that we can have dynamic, wonderful compost sites in every neighborhood, and that really is the way it needs to happen. You know, shouldn't be a backyard that's not big enough, frankly. You don't get enough thermal mass, you're always going to have rodent problems. It should be neighborhood compost piles. You know, you want to have, you know, enough people composting that you've got a windrow that's like 50 feet long and 7 feet wide and 6 feet high. You know, and there could be, you know, actually, you could have diesel ones that ran on biofuel. We could even keep them going if we ran out of our other energy. There could be compost turners that went around, you know. And I also now have developed, with the help of John Nelson, and actually he developed it, I just implemented it, and proven that you can just turn that stuff once or twice, put it on pipes that have like the kind of drainage pipes that are pointing up instead, and get a chimney effect to work to keep that power running. So you don't even need to turn it all the time, you know. And we're now learning we need to play more with even those mixes to get different effects from that compost. Compost can actually be not just a problem, you know, not just, oh, how do we take care of our food waste, but an important, a critical piece to deeply resilient food production. And we need to get there, you know, completely. And then that combined with the biochar, now you're getting that dynamically negative, carbon negative impact on the soil. So we have those ways, and I mean, in the 1860s and 70s, Paris was food sufficient almost completely, except for grain. They had horses that were the taxis and stuff. All that horse manure went to the edges of Paris, and all the vegetables and stuff were grown right there. It's been done before. Peter Kropotkin wrote a whole book about this, Foods, Farms, and Factories, back in the 1800s. You know, that this stuff can be done very effectively right near the cities. You know, Cuba, peak oil. Russia stopped giving them subsidized oil. They had to reinvent themselves. They learned how to grow their food right in their cities. You know, we can do this. You know, and we will. I think actually, in the end, have healthier communities, not just physically, but emotionally. I think that we are in trouble in some ways because of our ever-increasing alienation from nature. We can't do that because we are part of nature.